All right, welcome to the AHT podcast, a podcast that aims to have meaningful conversations that aim to help men in becoming more capable and more competent in how they live as protectors, as husbands, as fathers, as brothers, and as leaders. I'm your host, David Acosta Jr., and today I am joined by Mr. Scott Howell. For those of you that don't know, Scott is the founder of Red Dot Fitness, and he's the host of the Iron Sights podcast. For nearly 3 decades, he's worked as a coach, a leader, a business operator, and a student of human performance. Through that work, he's helped people pursue better health, improve performance, overcome obstacles, and make meaningful changes in their lives. He's also spent years sitting across from leaders, coaches, first responders, entrepreneurs, high performers through the Iron Sights podcast, essentially exploring the lessons, experiences, and principles that shape who people become. What I think interests me most about Scott isn't just what he has essentially accomplished, but more so what he's observed through his work. When you spend decades helping people improve themselves, I think you start recognizing patterns that begin to emerge. Some people start to change, some people don't. Some people take ownership while other people avoid it. Some continue to grow long after success arrives, while others become essentially trapped by habits and ego or comfort, you name it. So today we're going to explore those observations. We'll discuss responsibility, leadership, human performance, behavior, coaching, fatherhood, health, and lessons that come from spending a lifetime helping people become better versions of themselves. So, Scott, welcome to the podcast, bro.
David, I'm honored to be here, man. Thanks for having me. It's been a long time since we've seen one another in person, but this is definitely a treat for me. Thank you for inviting me on the show today.
Yeah, bro, it's my honor, honestly. All right, so Scott, before there was Red Dot Fitness, before there was Iron Sights and coaching and leadership or any of the things that people know you for today, there was a set of influences, obviously, that helped shape how you essentially see the world. And I essentially want to start there and kind of better understand some of the foundations that were laid early on for you. When you think back to like your childhood, what did that look like?
Yeah, I was super fortunate. My parents are still together after almost 60 years of marriage. I have a brother who's 5 years younger than I am, and I just blurted out my parents. They were hugely influential on both of us, particularly me. I was the older brother by 5 years, so I had a little bit of time without him before he came along and wrecked my world. And I wasn't the only kid in the house anymore. But that said, we kind of came from my parents had several siblings that had several children, so like I was kind of introduced to the family dynamic early and just kind of like what that looked like. And it was different for the different families. And it was interesting. I remember as a kid observing that, like what's tolerated, what isn't tolerated in terms of behavior, what guidelines exist for people, what are their kids and their parents involved in, how involved are kids or parents in their kids' lives and vice versa. But my parents were hugely influential in a lot of ways, and too many to list. But I think some of the things that stand out for me are that they were both very hard workers. They came from rough upbringings. My dad grew up in an incredibly poor household, like no electricity, no plumbing type of household. My mom had grown up sort of as the youngest child of 4. Her oldest brother was 18 years older than her, and then the next in line was like 8 years older than her. So she came in kind of late in the game, and so the house was empty as the kids were moving on in life, getting married early and moving on. So she grew up kind of on her own, very independent, and again, not wealthy by any means, living in South Central Los Angeles. And I remember those stories that my parents would tell me, and we'd gone and kind of visited where they'd grown up, and it was a little shocking because they had the goals and values that they had instilled in us early were really just like, we want our kids to have what we didn't have. We're not going to hand it to them, but we want them to know where they came from, and we want them to have experiences that we didn't have and opportunities that we didn't have. And that came in a lot of different shapes and sizes. I mean, from a very early on, we were involved in sports. It was a way for us to stay active, learn that sense of team, responsibility. Again, I think it was a lot of just being active, whether it was soccer or baseball or whatever it was. They also got us, got me involved in like Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, and things like that. So from an early age, there was responsibilities and there were, commitments that needed to be met and things like that. And just in kind of keeping it high level, there was a very high level of respect that I had for my parents from a very early age. And one of the things I never wanted to do was, number one, violate any kind of trust that I had with them, because I trusted them and I didn't want to be that person that they had to question. And secondly, I didn't want to disappoint them. And while they didn't set like expectations that were unrealistic or were, I don't know, kind of vicariously trying to live through their kids, it was very clear, what our expectations were. We had very clear, like right and left parameters. And really it was very simple, like you get freedom to make your own decisions and your own choices. And that comes with responsibility. There are actions and consequences to those things. And that started very early. And me particularly, like I took that very seriously all the way, through grade school and elementary and then on into high school and then on to later in life. So I feel like I was really set up for success with some really great parents that didn't necessarily have a lot, and maybe not the greatest coaches, if you want to call it that, as parents, growing up, but figured out a way to be amazing coaches to me and to help me set my own personal standards, and base those off of what I had seen my folks do and how hard they worked and what they were able to provide, and being able to take time out for us, when it mattered, and be there all the time for all the things. That really impacted me, and it certainly impacts me to this day, and certainly how I handle myself as an adult with my own kids.
That's awesome, man. Sounds like a phenomenal upraising. Scott, what would you say, looking back on it, in regards to your father, what do you think is one of the most valuable lessons you learned from him early on?
I'll take it back to the hard work piece, and I think there's a couple of components there. My dad, again, did not have a lot growing up, so he'd gone into the service. Joined the Air Force when he was very young, when he was 17 years old or whatever, and got in. And he had a very specific goal in mind. He's like, I'm going to use this to my advantage. Like I think I need an education, right? That's what's going to get me the things that I need in life. And this is a means to do that. And so he kind of took that route, worked hard, traveled around, did some things, came back, and then, he'd met my mom immediately coming back, and then enrolled in school and used the GI Bill in order to do that. And wound up getting 2 master's degrees over time, going to night school while working full time, and student loans and grants and things like that. Pardon me. Dad's a very analytical. He's an engineer by trade, and so he was very calculated in the methods. But along that way, he also was highly involved in fitness. He took his fitness pretty seriously. He's the guy that introduced me to it. What I found in that, going back to those components, was there was a very steady consistency. My old man is the epitome of, we do it this way because we know it works, and why would we do it any differently? Because this is what has been successful. And it's very, very it's regimented in a sense, but also very predictable to a certain extent. It's kind of a math. Everything's kind of a math problem. If we want to get to here, what are the steps we need to take? And he was always very much like that. And so I think what I picked up from that is look, when you set your mind to something, if you're going to commit to something, if you need to get something done, there needs to be some type of a plan. It needs to be organized and structured. And let's not overcomplicate this. Sometimes it did get overcomplicated. We go back to like high school science projects and things like that, and Dad wanted to be involved and things. If there was a project that we were going to do, man, we were going all the way. We weren't doing anything half-assed. those are things I learned. And I think there was value. There's a lot of value in that. In even in the frustration that I felt along the way with some of that. Like, nah, Dad, because I'm a rule bender, and been known to be a rule breaker. And Dad was not that guy, and he was always the guy to kind of steer me back on the path. And as much as frustration as I probably caused him in wanting to bend the rules or take a shortcut, whatever else, as regimented as he was, he gave me the freedom and flexibility to make my own decisions. He would check in with me. And again, I'm sure there was a lot of frustration there along the way because I wasn't like him in that sense. And I think he struggled with that. But what I watched, the beauty in that was I watched him struggle and overcome it, right? And be totally supportive one way or another. He didn't necessarily like it, but he was super supportive of what I was doing. And he allowed me to make mistakes. He allowed me to fail. And at the same time, he was there to, pick me up, support me, steer me on the right path, never try and take over. Just kind of like, hey, man, well, what are you going to do now? Kind of thing. And, right. We kind of talked about this. And so I think the structure that he had in his own life and how he handled everything from work to family to himself, personally and professionally. The dude was the guy that was there before everybody else in the office. He was the last guy to leave. And he also managed to be at every single thing that ever happened for me and my brother, and be active. And so I think what I took from that was with structure, with organization, as tough as the thing might be, as the job changed, we got transferred across the country, things like that. Dude always made room. There was never a time where there wasn't enough room for his kids or for what he felt was important. And the main thing there was family. So I think, those are just, again, like I said, I was super fortunate to get that kind of an experience when I know so many people out there haven't.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Such a solid example. What about mom? What do you think you got most from mom?
The matriarch, the person. So mom was, pardon me, mom was a nurse, registered nurse and worked for nearly 50 years. And started at a time when nursing was very different. I went to VA, she went to a nursing school very young. She was the youngest one in her class, and made it through there, and then immediately started, exploring all the things that were out there to explore as a nurse. And she spent the majority of her time in the intensive care unit and worked nights for a lot of our childhood. She worked the 11P to 7A shift. Was the charge nurse, groomed and brought up new nurses or new people that were coming in. And those people she had very, very close relationships with, and she cared about them. So I saw that kind of happening on the professional side. Like she really cared. At the same time, like she was always the person that anybody in the extended family would call if there was an issue, right? Because mom was always there to listen, lend a hand, give some guidance, some perspective, so forth. Again, like my father, she took care of us. I'm spoiled in a sense. Like, our job was to go to school, learn, be involved in our activities, succeed, fail, grow, and those things. She did everything she could to make sure that we didn't have to worry about anything while we were growing up, being kids. Very, very, cooked, cleaned. Did our laundry. We'd come home, the laundry would be folded, in the drawers, kind of thing. There was a consistency to that. Mom was always there. There was also, like, nobody was going to get between Mama Bear and the cubs. So she certainly, like my dad, let us make our own decisions and our own mistakes. But if she felt like we were wronged in any kind of way, or we were wrong in any kind of way, that wasn't going to slide. Somebody was going to get it. Sometimes that was us, and sometimes that was the giver on the other end of whatever that might be. So there was a strong matriarchal, I think, sort of aura to her. And if anybody has anybody like that in their life, they know what I'm talking about. They'll take care of every single person that they come across. Like, they'll go way out of their way. But mom always knows boundaries too. She knows where where the end is, what she can do, what she can't do. So super super in touch, I think, emotionally with that, as well as like what her primary responsibility to was for her, and that was always taking care of her family. That was always family first. But at the same time, she was the den mom, the team mom. Even when we got into high school and on the football team, the pre-football dinners would be at our house. She would put those things together. The PTA groups, the band when we were playing in the school band or whatever. She was always there, going on the trips if we went on a trip, and so forth. So again, just a hard worker, knew when to shut it off and turn it on, kind of thing, and still does that to this day. In fact, she comes into the gym, 2 days a week, works out still.
That's
so
awesome.
I see her pretty regularly. Yeah.
Love it. That's awesome, man. So in our discussions, especially early on when we first met, I've always seen you've had a very analytical mentality, right? Like, hey, what about this? And why would that go that way? And why not this? And what do you think about this? And just very objective, analytical, open-minded. And you've also like described yourself as someone who's questioned authority and pushed against just generally accepted ideas. Where do you think that tendency came from?
Well, first off, I've done a lot of things. I think, early on for me, it was like, what are the rules? I want to understand what the rules are, whatever it is, whether you're playing in a game or you're going to school and there's, a project that you have to do. Like, I want to understand what the rules were. Like, just tell me and then tell me what the goal is. So I don't know exactly, but I always wanted a little autonomy to figure it out, right? Just tell me what I have to get done and give me a little flexibility and freedom to get that job done for you. Again, going back to my dad, he like, no, we're doing it this way. And I was like, yeah, but what if we do a little bit of this at the same time? So there's a little creative in there too. But for me, it was like trying to understand the why behind things. And I think that started for me very early on. And I recognized when I understood that better, I could function better. If I understood what the goal was and what the why behind the goal was, like, it's like, okay, I get this. Now I can be bought into this. I can do this work. I can follow this roadmap, right? Whatever it happens to be. Like, if you show me this is the best way, just tell me why it's the best way and I'll do it. But again, the rule bending or the pushing back against the status quo, as I was looking at it and, sometimes I'm going, yeah, but that might not be the best way for me. How do I know I can be successful here? Where can I play my strengths and understand where my weaknesses are? And sometimes that gets you into a little bit of trouble. And I think, that was good, right? I wound up in a couple of situations where I was over my skis, way out in front of my skis. And, then you have to learn how to like reel that back. And then a part of the thing going back to mom and dad was, again, with the actions and consequences, was taking personal responsibility for stuff. So, and that was ingrained in us. This is on you. You made this decision. You're going to have to fix it or, make it better. And at the same time, with the success comes the reward. So I was kind of always very aware of that balance. So going back to the objectivity and the again, kind of pushing back against the status quo or being analytical at some level, I think I was very inquisitive. Like, I wanted to know how things worked. I like to tinker. I like to understand things. And for me, the reward was in understanding it more. So that I could have a discussion about it and more specifically ask good questions about it. Like, so if I understand this, now I can ask a question. I didn't necessarily like taking orders. We already covered that, right? So if you're going to tell me to do this thing, just tell me why I'm doing it. And so if I have a question, this is not a challenge. This is a challenge to you or the thing. It's just, this is more for me. I probably struggled with presenting it that way, early on. But I think as time went on, as I got older, I just recognized there's more than one way to skin a cat almost every single time. There is no one size fits all to everything. There's several good ways to get something done. I think there's a lot of wrong ways to do it. How do you find that solution that makes the most sense for you? for the thing that you're doing. So again, I think it kind of started early on, and then there were just a lot of exposures to a lot of things. Good credit to my parents getting me involved in lots of activities, being around adults, kids, competition, challenging myself as in the world of academia. Like I was always a pretty good student. I liked the reward of getting a good grade and feeling good about that, but also understanding the thing that I did and the work that I put into it. And I think that just came from just kind of digging into things a little bit more and not being satisfied with the ticking the box, kind of option. I've ticked plenty of boxes.
Yeah.
Some of that, sometimes that can be rewarding, just get to the end. But yeah, it's always been about for me is like let me understand this, and when I do that, I can be successful in my own way. And so I think that was the drive. Like I want to be successful. How do I do that with with where I'm coming into this problem set with, or this challenge, or whatever else? And I think that kind of put me in some positions, maybe from a leadership position, the captain of this, or the leader of that, or the president of this, or the president of that, because I was able to sort of objectively do the same with the people that may have been on my team or in my group or whatever else. Like, okay, well, how do we organize this thing to be successful, where we're all kind of getting what we want and what we need, and we're not all having to work too hard to achieve that.
Do you find yourself often, especially in the younger ages, did you find yourself often looking at things from the perspective of trying to make it better, or how can it be better?
Great question. I don't know that I had that much wherewithal. I think, going back, it was like, how do I not screw this up? Like, I think early on, it was, you're part of a team here. Everybody has, again, I think that was a really important part of my childhood, was being part of a team and recognizing what your responsibilities were. And I was never the best athlete, the fastest kid, the strongest kid, anything like that by any means. But I was able to excel because I understood what I was supposed to be doing, and I understood what other people were supposed to be doing. So I could, maybe you're making up the gap where something exists, or you're able to talk to another teammate or, person within your organization or whatever to help you with something. I never had a problem asking for help. But I think those exposures to that thing, or to those kind of things, kind of set me up to, I guess, to be, like I said, be successful in certain things, and then those failures in those certain things. And I'm not entirely sure if I'm answering your question or not, but it's I guess again, going back to objectivity and being analytical, it was like, well, if you're putting together this thing and the goal is this, and the structure is supposed to be this, like there's a structure for a reason. How can we make it better? I wasn't necessarily trying to make it better. It was like, it was like, how do we do this thing really well? Regardless of whether it gets better or not. And I think as you do that and you recognize where the weaknesses and the strengths are, you start to learn like how it can be better, how you can personally contribute to that, or where maybe somebody else isn't pulling their weight, or where we have a gap in the process or the system or the person, whatever that is. And that stuff, now that I guess you got me talking about it, that stuff kind of bothered me, because I started to recognize like not everybody's bought into this. Why not? Like we're a team, or you're going to school. You have really nothing better to do than go to school and sit in class and take your tests and get your grades and whatever else. Like, not trying to pretend like I know what everything's going on with everybody outside of the world that I see. Where I'm like, what is the problem here? Like, what? I don't understand this. Like, what? Why are you making this so difficult for yourself and more so for everybody else? That frustrated me. I did not have enough emotional intelligence then, when I was younger, to understand that, and that probably got me into a lot of trouble, actually. Just reacting or saying things or assuming things that I just didn't have a lot of I guess information or wherewithal about.
Yeah, that's a great answer, man. In light of that, and I kind of want to, this is with the intent of trying to understand your mentality kind of earlier on, right, versus where it is now. But so as a young man, especially like, going toward adulthood, so to say, what did you believe was like most important in life as a man, as a young man, and how has that understanding essentially changed over time, if so at all?
Oh gosh, yeah. So I think early on, it's what a lot of people, probably my age, and I'm 51 to, full disclosure, I'm 51, so I was an 80s and 90s kid. And, back then what you did was you went to school, you tried to get good grades, maybe played some sports, tried to get into a college, get an education, and that was going to set you up for whatever those next steps were going to be, which would be get a good job, earn a living, get a retirement plan, own a home, settle down, have some kids, work for however long you're going to work for, and then retire and live on your retirement. That's just what was around me. I didn't have a lot of experience. That's what my parents were doing. That's what a lot of the people that were, that I was closely associated with were in the midst of, or doing themselves, both as people my age, but also their parents, and kind of what I was around. So as I kind of transitioned out of grade school, high school, if you will, and kind of seeing the world and how it operated, I recognized that there were options out there that I hadn't really considered. I hadn't maybe been exposed to before. And school for me at that point, I did not have, like going into college, I thought I had direction, but it wasn't really well developed. Again, outside of what I just said, which is very broad, very broad. And, I recognized, the time I was spending, the effort and the work I was putting in, and who I was getting information from, and the tests I was trying to pass, or the education I was trying to get. Like I struggled with it. I didn't have a very deep connection to it. And like I said, I'd always been a good student. That wasn't an issue. I just wasn't a good student of things that I didn't care about, and or see a lot of value in. And I struggled there for a long time, and then it was trying to figure out, like, well, what's the right answer here? Like, I have this opportunity, I'm in university or whatever, and what I see is that you need to do these things to achieve something, whatever that happens to be. But I didn't have a really well developed idea of what that was. It's just kind of it's an ideal, so to speak. So, as a young man, and now we're into my 20s, I was a little misdirected. I had a lot of energy, and I didn't really know where to put it for a bit there. And so, I was kind of bouncing around, and in the back of my head going, like, again, going back to my folks, I didn't want to disappoint them. They had worked hard to put me to help me be in a situation where I didn't have to worry about a lot of things, and a lot of things that I didn't even understand yet. And, was I pissing this away? But I just didn't know. So I think I had a lot of misdirected and misplaced energy, in terms of where I was going to put that, and things you're getting older, like football's ending, again, I'm struggling with, like, am I doing the right thing in school here? I'm working jobs because I've always had a job since I was 12 years old. So I'm doing that, and I know that's important. And, but I wasn't really moving anywhere. It was just kind of in flux. So I was a little bit out of touch with myself, I think, and where I wanted to go.
How would you say that changed over time?
Well, I think part of it is like kind of what gets forced, and then part of it is what you'll realize some things, whether you like it or not. And then there's also, again, going back to my kind of being a rule bender, or looking for alternate ways to use my strengths. Again, I was still a little misdirected, but taking it back to the sports thing. So, working out, fitness was always really important for me, but there was a drive to do it. Like, it's to be the bigger, faster, stronger wrestler or football player or guy on the track and field team. That's very easy. Like, there's a season. Here's the thing I'm training for. Like, you're graded on your wins and your losses, and that kind of thing. And so, like, if I needed to improve something, there was a pathway to go to get that done, and it was very specific. Like, you're driving towards this thing. In school, same thing. Like you're moving on from one class to the next class, so you can take your next level classes and your undergraduate to your graduate stuff and any of that. For me, again, like, I kind of lost direction. So sports was over. So, like, the workout thing, like, super important to me in my life, but I didn't really have a drive to do anything. The school thing was a little bit of a thing. Like, I was, like, trying to figure out, like, am I studying the right stuff? Is this really where I want to go? I'd done some internships and things like that. I'm like, I may have made a big mistake here, and I invested a lot of time and my, again, finance and energy into this. And so I think a couple critical points for me. One was the connection to fitness for me was super important, and I knew I needed something to do. And at the time, let's go back to the '90s now. Like, there was kind of a couple things, and it wasn't a lot. Like anymore, there's a lot of accessibility for people to go do stuff. But bodybuilding was the thing. I was in the gym, and so like I was like, okay, well maybe I make a run at this. I've got plenty of years of experience under my belt with this. Like if I changed up my training program and how I focus on things, maybe this is a thing. And so one of the things I did was I got heavy. I studied it, not just in like Muscle and Fiction magazine, but which is what we had. This was kind of pre-internet, at the time. So you're literally
Muscle fiction.
Yeah. And that said, I would say this. I think the fitness industry was better when it was just that, if I'm being honest. We kept it really simple. As false as some of the stuff was, or as misleading as some of the stuff was, it still kept it simple, right? And people could get results off of that. I don't know why they're so quick to overcomplicate this stuff, but there's a lot of complexity to it, but let's not confuse things. But that said, like I got into that, and then I nutrition was something that I was trying to understand better. And I knew that for me to make the progress from where I was really going to have to understand that. I didn't know. So, I'd read all the books I could read, all the magazine periodicals I could read, what's this bodybuilder doing or what's this athlete doing, and trying to understand stuff. So I'd gone to the owner at the time, who was also a pro bodybuilder, female, and I'd said, look, I need some help. And she knew me because I'd been around the gym for quite some time. I was there 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, kind of thing. And I was like, I need some help with this. And she's like, cool, I'll help you, but that ain't free. And I was like, well, I'm a starving student. I don't know. I'm like, how much is it going to cost? What can I do? She's like, well, I've seen you working out. I know you, I need a training partner. If you come in at 4:30 a.m. every day and work out with me, then I will give you this information. So we were kind of bartering. I was like, show me where to sign. So I did that, and I learned a lot. And the point to this is after working out with her for several months and grinding through that. By the way, I was closing down the bar as a bouncer at 2 a.m. and I was opening up the gym at 4:30 a.m. And still trying to be a student. Later. Yeah, it wasn't a good recipe for success, but I was grinding, and that's what I wanted. So I was doing the thing. She said, "Hey, you're very knowledgeable with this stuff, and you actually do a really good job. You're picking this stuff up. Have you ever considered being a personal trainer?" Never crossed my mind. That wasn't a thing then. You were either a strength and conditioning coach or you were a bodybuilder, that was trying to pay your bills by helping other people, learn how to exercise, which was a swath of all kinds of stuff. It's still the same, but different then. That's kind of what it was to me. Like, that's what I understood. And she kind of painted a picture for some of the things that could be done, and she kind of took a chance on me, and I did that, and then I was kind of like, whoa, you can make pretty good money at the time for me doing this, way more with way less risk than what I was dealing with from 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. 4 or 5 nights a week at the stand at the door of a bar, and the things that happened there. I was like, maybe let me check this out. So I kind of started going like this vocational path of learning more about anatomy and physiology and things I'd taken in school, but at a different level, actual application of it from some really smart people. And at the time, there was no internet certifications and things like that. You'd gone to workshops. You had to travel to go do this. So it cost money. There was travel. There was hotel. There was, there were 5-day, workshops that were practical and lecture and things like that for people that had actually done the thing and been successful, but had also gone through this very long, arduous path of all these other things in their life, whether they were physical therapists, pro athletes, exercise physiologists, like really educated people that had come from the collegiate level, the pro levels, and things like that. So I was getting like this concentrated, focused energy on things that I was very interested by. So going back to being the student and misdirected, I was like locked in. When's the next one? How quick can I get back and start to apply this to myself and to my clients? And that learning process and that learning curve was very, very sharp, but the trajectory of it just continually moved up. And I started to learn things. And at the same time, I was learning about business at a totally different level, and learning about people, learning about humans, their behaviors, what were their challenges, the things that were going on in life. And I was studying all of that I was a nerd. I wanted to know everything there was, and so I was asking a lot of questions, and I was doing a lot of things, and there was an inflection point there where I became semi-successful as a coach, and then the next thing I know, I'm managing a few coaches. Probably had no business doing that, but I was given the opportunity. I'm like, well, how much does that pay? And they told me, it was like, sign me up, right? And so that's probably where that kind of started for me. And when I say that, there were just so many things there. There was the educational pathway in terms of understanding the human body, its function, sports performance, nutrition, and then more importantly, I think the business aspect of things, and then building relationships, professionally, what that looks like, sales, marketing, all of those things. You're kind of getting like a bachelor's degree in all of that stuff in a very like you're getting a lot of reps
Yeah.
that I think a lot of people don't realize are so important, because all the things you learn, and it only didn't take very long for I was like, I'm doing this, and here I am,
Yeah.
29 years later, still doing it.
Man. So how much of that role, like how much of that phase would you say plays into the way you approach things today? That lesson, so to say.
Yeah, significantly. The way that path kind of went was, it started there, and then I messed up that relationship. At the same time, going back to being a rule bender and trying to do more and be good at something, I thought I could probably be better on my own. I think a lot of people go through that. Like, well, if I'm doing this here and they're paying me, they're making this much money, and they're paying me this much money, this is a struggle. I think any coach ends up going through at some point. Well, I've got these clients, I can do this somewhere else, and I kind of started to tiptoe around that, and that ruined trust with the person that had looked out for me. And so I learned a hard lesson there, and then I recognized, like, I don't think there's a way for me to salvage this. Like, I've ruined this, so I'm going to have to go a different direction. And I ended up working for somebody else for a while, which was another huge come up for me, because this person had come from a very structured, huge corporation, was now working in a smaller club, and was able to teach me things that I didn't fully understand. And then that worked into, now the next thing I knew, I was managing that club, and then took a job with a very large company. I had 5 clubs, and then I was successful there, and I moved on to have 40 clubs, and then there was 150 clubs, and then ultimately I was a national director of a really big company, and there were 430 some odd clubs. And so, like, the things that you learn along that, you can't get that experience. You can pay for that experience, right? So how did it impact me? It impacted me tremendously in terms of providing opportunities and putting myself in positions to take advantage of those opportunities when they came up. Ultimately, to owning my own business and being able to take all those lessons, all those failures, all those and any successes that I had, and apply them again with the autonomy, right, and the flexibility and freedom that I knew I needed to be ultimately successful for me, right? And what did that mean for me? That was kind of the journey there.
I feel like, as important as our early influences are, there comes a point where life starts teaching its own lessons. Success can be a great teacher, but failure often has a way of getting our attention much, much faster. You've spoken about learning through mistakes, through consequences, and taking ownership of your circumstances. I'd like to spend some time kind of exploring that terrain, if you will. So when you look back on your life, what are some of the lessons that took you the longest to learn from?
Patience. Patience. I think patience is the thing that I've always struggled with. I mean, Cece, my better half, always says you need to put your patience pants on. She still tells me that to this day, and I think, and I need to be reminded of that. I think it's always been a challenge for me to not get to the finish line faster. Like, what am I missing? How do I be more efficient here? What are the things that I'm doing or I'm not doing, or what are the things that other people, what are the restrictions that other people have that could be slowing this process down, or whatever else? And also, how come you're not getting this? Like, is it me that's not explaining this correctly? Do you need some training on this? Are you not bought into this? What are those things? And so, it's probably more impacted me like on the business, like the professional side, than it has, and on the personal side of that, I think the thing you mentioned, like life teaching you lessons. The thing that taught me the most about patience was having kids. Um, the lessons that they teach you are in, more than that. It's not like it's like getting punched square in the mouth.
Yeah.
From time to time with like, dude, this is all on you, right? Like this is purely like you've going back to like in my own experience, like you've got to give this person some room, this child or whoever, some room to kind of figure this out, and don't you may not having preconceived notions about what they should be able to get accomplished or whatever else coming from wherever they came from in life and whatever successes and failures or experiences that they've had. That's been a thing that I've always kind of struggled with. I think probably, if I'm being honest with myself, probably in the last 5-6 years, I've gotten better, much better. And I don't know if that's my advanced age or
Yeah.
just having more challenges to deal with and seeing how people deal with those challenges, things that I think are very that people can relate to that are common. I mean, one of those challenges, I'm a brick and mortar, you know, business owner in California, and COVID had happened. And that was a wild time for everybody. So I think everybody can kind of relate to that at this point on the timeline of, planet Earth, and remember that. But for me, it was being able to watch children, my own as well as others, parents, teenagers, because I had teenager at the time. She was a teenager at the time, um, and adults that I was close. I had close relationships with, like personally as well as professionally. Watching businesses and business leaders, everybody struggle. Everybody struggled at
Yeah.
some level with something. And what that taught me, I think that perspective of kind of watching how these individuals did, work through the problem set, whatever it was, or the struggle that they had, helped me with on the patient's side a little bit more to kind of just sit back and go, um, maybe you need to give some people a little bit more grace here. Maybe that's the case. Maybe you've just set your expectations way too high, Scott. Like maybe this just is like you're expecting something that just isn't going to happen. And when I kind of I think I really kind of dug into that. Like that helped me be more patient with myself, with like not letting myself, my mind, my psyche, my attitude, whatever I was projecting, get in front of me, to sit back and really take a deep breath and look at things as one example in life, as a lesson, and how that impacted me on the patient side. Again, something that's very relatable, I think, to everybody in their own way, because they all have families, in other parts of the country, that know people in other parts of the country. And you were watching this dynamic happen that was really interesting to me. It was very frustrating. It was very financially devastating. I was watching my youngest, my stepdaughter, really struggle in school. She'd never done that before. I was watching her deal with stuff. She was having to watch her parents deal with all of this stuff, and so it made me really step back and go, maybe you need to take a few more deep breaths, man. Harness this energy that you have. Sit back, meditate on it if that's what you do, or think more deeply on it before you open your mouth, or let yourself get into a state that drives decision making or behaviors that are just unproductive. So I
Yeah.
guess it's a long way to get to the patience piece. I still struggle with it, but that patience in all things.
Both.
Patience in all things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I can relate to that. Scott, you've mentioned that taking responsibility for everything that happens to and for you kind of became a recurring theme. Was there a particular experience or season rather, that made that lesson essentially impossible to ignore?
Man, that's a very direct question. Yeah, I mean, if I'm opening up here, and I think about this more like with from the relationship side of things. Relationships are really important to me. I think I have a very I like to think that I have a very good gauge on what that actually means. I think people talk about relationships, but I think the relationships are defined by certain things, whether this is personal or with yourself, whether it's with, in business, whether it's, it's a professional thing or personal thing. There's a family dynamic there and things like that. So if I kind of rewind the tape on um, that personal responsibility piece, I've been I've been through several things: job transitions, moves, relationships. Been married and divorced, and I have kids. And that I've seen go through various stages of life. And I think a few of the things. There's kind of a negative and a positive example here. One of those is when I think back to my previous relationship with my oldest mom. I was chasing that career path really hard. And in my mind, the reason I was doing that was because I wanted to make a better life for us. I didn't really have an end state though. There wasn't and there wasn't an exit strategy. In the back of my mind, there always was, like, because I knew right from the get go, like, I want to own my own brick and mortar someday, and I want to help people in the way that I think they need the help. And that's going to be to a very specific group of people in a very specific kind of way. And so eventually, I'll have my own business, right? But that's very broad. There wasn't a lot of hard, decisions made about what that was going to look like, how much money did I need to make, how was I going to do that, all of those kind of things. So I was working for a company, and they had offered me a position where I was basically on planes, trains, and automobiles 3 weeks out of every month. And to me, that made a lot of sense because that's what I was going to need to do in order to kind of achieve this next level of success financially, from a status perspective, put that acronym by my name, that could propel me into the next position within the company, or maybe into another company, or at least give me an experience that I knew I would probably need being my own boss, right, at some point.
Yeah.
But that was very damaging. And I don't think I spent enough time discussing that with both my wife at the time or the people in my life that probably could have provided me some pretty serious perspective on that and what the cost benefit would be to taking on a position like that and chasing that as hard as I did. And so taking personal responsibility, I know I did not do a good job there. And so people were, including my wife at the time, and I'm sure I know my daughter at the time, had questions like, what are you doing, man? Like, like, I know you're busy and I know you're working hard. That's just in you. Like, we get that. That's not a thing. But like, where's the balance lie? Where's this going? And what can we expect? Because I did not set clear expectations. And that was very damaging, and to my relationship with both of them, to the relationship I had with myself. I had to do some serious soul searching at one point because I had kind of reached a brick wall in that position, and I recognized, holy crap, I have to get out of here. Like, in the moment was, at the end of every school year, if you've got kids, they usually do two things a year. They have the back to school night. So as soon as the kids start the school year, you go to the school, you meet the teachers, you get the parents get to size up, who their kid's going to be in front of for, 6 hours a day or whatever, and kind of what the curriculum looks like, get a feel for the layout and all that kind of thing. And so there's that. And then at the end of the year, oftentimes there's a back to school, end of year thing where you go in and you see all your kids' projects, and, you get to see what they've kind of been up to. And sometimes that ends with like a drama performance and a band performance or something like that. Right. And both of those things had happened in the same year. And I went to that end of the year thing, and I walked into the classroom and I recognized I'd missed a whole year of my kid's life. That moment was like, man, I really messed this up. Like, it wasn't without good intention, but that intention was not met with clear expectations about what the cost was going to be to everybody involved. And I felt, there was a deep sense of guilt and failure and remorse for everything I had missed. And even despite putting stopgaps in that, like when I was home, I was trying to be home, but I was also on the road 3 weeks a month. I don't need to tell you what traveling around and giving that energy and getting that energy back takes from you, and how much do you have left in the tank when you're there before you have to put on that different hat, get on that airplane again, and go off to the next thing. We'd planned, there were family trips, there was family time every on the weekend. I'd even bought a boat, to take out on the lake on the weekend, which was awesome. I was like, I need the biggest boat I can find that can fit the most amount of my family in it. And we're just, so we can go out, have a good time, be active, listen to music, eat. We're all together all the time. And those kind of things. Like I was trying to be actively in front of this, but I wasn't doing a good job. Just nothing like that can replace the dinner table conversations at the end of every day, the check-ins, the sending your kid off to school and whatever else. So I think on the negative side, that was the thing. That was a major turning point in my life. I was in my 30s at that point, and I was like, wow, I need to make some decisions. I need to make them now. And I'd also, because of all that, I'd established a lifestyle that I couldn't just turn that off, right? So it took me another year to exit out of that situation, to then jump into another one where I wasn't making nearly the same amount of money, right? So financially I was being strained and things like that. And that, for me, that was all my fault. Like, I could have done a way better job at this, and probably not put other people in some really challenging positions along the way. So again, that's kind of like the downside, or the negative side of it. The other side, and follow this just up, and I can make this one brief, and that's with my oldest daughter, who, despite all that, we have a really great relationship. Again, there was a divorce in there that really challenged things, but she made it. She made it through the basic things that most kids make it through. You get through high school, and you go into school. She went away, and she's very much like me, and like I like rules. I just need to know what they are, but I'm not going to be satisfied with being the line guy, right? So you show me the path to get to the next thing, because that's where I want to be. And then when I get there, I'll figure out what the next thing is. But and I want to move there pretty fast. So I'm going to do all the things, again, be at work before everybody else, be the last one there, be available, put me in coach, the hand goes up if they need something, kind of thing. And then the lessons that you learn, dealing with humans and people and management and life and sleep and taking care of yourself and still trying to be social and have friends and all those things. So I watched her go through this whole journey, and it's just like, probably in the last couple of years, to me, she's only 24 now, but she's so wise, beyond her years, and she's so settled with herself as a person. I think part of that is, like, now the frontal lobe is fully wired because it's not there. You think you're there at like 16, 17 years old, you're not even close. You're still an idiot, right? I mean, I certainly was. And I'm not calling my daughter an idiot, but I recognize that. I'm like, yeah, she's not fully there yet. I'm going to have to be patient and, let her make her decisions go. But man, she has turned out to be such a solid human being, and so focused on the right things, and so objective about so many things. When I sit and I have conversations with her, it just blows my mind. How similar we are, but also how different we are, and how confident she is in being different. And so when I look at, like, that personal responsibility, I mean, I made it my duty to make sure that I kind of gave her the same structure that my folks gave me. It was like, hey, as long as we have trust and we can talk to one another about things, and, we're open about what's going on, and we're not afraid to tell one another things, like, that is a really good basis for being in the right position when we don't agree with one another or whatever else. Because, if we don't agree, we don't agree. That doesn't mean I dislike you or I don't love you, or, we can't, come to some even ground on this. But now at this point in her life, she's just grown up to be like and again, she's 24. So she's got so much life left in front of her, and I'm super stoked to see what that goes. But I think from a personal responsibility perspective, is like, all the things you try to do as a dad that you think about as a young dad, like, I need to set my kid up for success, right? In whatever those ways are. And for me, it worked out. And for that, like, I do take some pride in the personal responsibility that I took there. She is living her own life and doing her thing. And I'm proud of her for it. And would not take any credit for that. But I would like to take a little bit of credit for being part of her success to this point. And again, that's just kind of standing on the shoulders of, the people before me, going back to my folks and all the people that supported me along the way.
All right, so I want to touch on something briefly that comes up a lot these days, and that is the subject of nicotine. There's a growing body of research around nicotine and its cognitive effects, specifically its ability to increase focus, alertness, and reaction time in the short term. We've personally found benefit in using it responsibly in the right context. So for myself and the rest of the team at AHT, if we're going to use something, we just want it to be clean, consistent, and controlled. And for us, that's where Zimmo comes in. So if you are already in that lane, kind of already tracking on this, or at least considering it, you can support those who support us by going to zimmopouches.com and check out what they have to offer. If you decide you want to make a purchase, feel free to use our partnership code at the checkout. Partnership code is AHT20. That's AHT20, and it'll save you 20% on checkout. So we appreciate you guys. Thanks. Yeah, that level of maturity is huge. Being able to look back at losses and turn them into lessons, if not for ourselves and for others. I think that's a level of maturity that most people don't actualize until later on in life, you know. Scott, you're 51. It is. It absolutely is. You're 51. Looking back at your younger versions of yourself, where, if at all, did or would you say emotion tend to interfere with like good judgment? And what helped you eventually recognize that?
David, I've made so many mistakes being emotional. I couldn't even begin to number or recall all of them. But I think
Just generically.
yeah, no, I think, but I'll answer the question. I think, again, going back to that time period where I said I was a little misdirected, I had misdirected energy. I think for me, and I think for a lot of men, when I think about this, it's very easy to get angry and be angry. That emotion kind of covers up, or it's the first thing we go to when we're feeling fearful, we're feeling inadequate, we're feeling maybe it's misdirected, not good enough, whatever the thing is, right? Like, I think it's very easy to get angry, and I was a very angry young man. It very closed-minded on a lot of things. You know, I had made up my mind, so I had thought about certain things, how things should be, how I should be, how people should be treated, how I should be treated, whatever else. And you know, that got me. I'll just be honest, it never worked out in a positive way. You know, there were altercations verbally, there were altercations physically. There was nothing that ever landed me in a position that would ruin my life, but I certainly didn't help other people being like that, and I didn't help myself. And again, I draw all that back to I just didn't have good direction, and that was on me. Like, I was trying to figure it out. And again, when you have that space and that time, and you don't have that northern star, whatever it is, that guiding light, whatever it happens to be, to kind of go back to, and you start to kind of cut it, you start to try to do it all on your own. And you don't have that circle around you, maybe of people to go, hey, dude, you need to check yourself right now, because right now what you're doing is out of line, out of control, like you're being a dick, whatever it happens to be. I didn't really have that. And so that emotional being out of control, like not recognizing, peeling back the layers of that onion, you know, showed up for me quite frequently. And I think when I found more direction in life, like there was a little bit more of a litmus there to okay, well, me being angry is not serving me in this particular sense. But it wasn't that the anger wasn't there, it was just maybe more suppressed. And, you know, I was kind of medicating with more exercise, or, you know, whatever, thoughts in my head or whatever, and it just wasn't being projected in the same kind of way. Again, as you get more mature and there's more liability, I think that was the liability that kind of suppressed it a little bit, because I had enough wherewithal to know, like, this is a mistake. Like, you can't act, say, do, you know, whatever this way. And, you know, trying to find outlets for that in whatever those happen to be, you know, through, and then also surrounding myself with recognizing, like, who is that, those mature people that seem to deal with this stuff so much better than me, and how are they doing that, and what am I missing here? Again, trying to be better and figure it out, asking questions. And then, you know, there were a couple of periods. I mean, I mentioned a couple of them. Divorce is a really ugly thing. It's not fun, and I found myself a very angry person again. Again, having my business shut down, losing everything I'd built in a very short period of time, you know, financially and from a business perspective, just watching it crumble. It was so much out of my control. Talk about anger. I'm still angry if I'm being honest. Like, I'm still angry about all of that. I just deal with it differently. I try to refocus or reharness it. So, I mean, those are certainly, I think, just kind of setting that whole thing up is like learning how to kind of reel back and go, what is it that I'm really feeling here, and am I really addressing that? Because being angry is super easy to do, and projecting anger is even easier for for me to do. So going back to patience and self-observation and studying myself, instead of studying so many other people, I started studying myself a little bit more and just kind of understand, like, what is it here, dude? Why are you so anxious? And, what is this angst that you're feeling? What is this about? And for a lot of people, that might sound really cheesy. I can kind of get that. But for anybody that's saying that out there, I would challenge you to maybe look a little deeper at what's really going on in there, because it's not, you're not angry, dude. There's something else going on, and there's an answer for that. You just have to be willing to go look for it.
That what you just said in regards to studying yourself, I think there's a lot there. That's huge, right? Like, a lot of people can, like, problems come up, but they start looking at all the external components and never, like, actualizing the internal components. When things go wrong today, how do you think about ownership differently today than you would have 20 years ago?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that really is the nexus of, like, where you start to figure this stuff out is, like, the reflection, right? And looking back to, like, well, what led up to this point? I don't think there's a simple way to boil this down, but, like, nothing is usually, without making an absolute statement, whatever is happening didn't just happen. There was an accumulation of events. There were inflection points there were things that happened, and then it hit this inflection point. What were the things that led to that? It's like the concept of compound interest, right? You're making these deposits, you're making these deposits, you're making these deposits, and at some point it kind of hits this spike. That rings true in life too, with, like, the emotional, wherewithal or emotional IQ of kind of what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, being able to unwind that a little bit. But more importantly, like, once you've done that enough times, then you start to recognize it while it's in process, right? And you're like, oh, I see where this is going now. I see how I'm feeling about this. Like, I'm recognizing my behaviors and my thoughts, and that could be, like, doing more of something, doing less of something, thinking more of something, thinking less of something, responding to things, how you're responding and things like that. Like, those are all clues to, whatever is likely going to happen. And I think for me, you have to go through that cycle a bunch of times. And unfortunately for a lot of people, they have to hit rock bottom on stuff. Things have to happen. Relationships have to get ruined. You have to ruin trust with people. I don't know. You could boil it down to something like getting a DUI. Like, anybody that's gotten a DUI, it's not the first time, right? It's not the first time. It's just the first time you got caught, right? And so how do you reflect on that and go, well, I mean, there's a very simple answer to solving that problem, but at the same time, it's like, what were the things that built up there, along the way, and kind of unwinding it all. So studying that, like, understanding what these things are, and not being afraid to do it. And that takes help. That means, for me, I am extraordinarily lucky with having Cece in my life. Like, I can talk to her about anything without fear of reprisal or, like, feeling less than. Like, sometimes it's just listening, right? Just getting it out to hear yourself say it. And sometimes it's a deeper conversation about, like, man, I'm really feeling this right now, and I'm not sure what to do with it. And then the next thing you know, you've been talking for 5 minutes and they haven't said a word, and they're just nodding their head, and you're like, thanks for letting me dump that. I'm good now. Because you figured out in that process. That's a way. It's not the only way, but it's a way. But you have to go through that cycle a few times before you can kind of recognize it. So bottling it up, not dealing with it, just projecting, or whatever else. Like, my experience has been that it's just never a good thing. Never works out for anything positive in the end. Except if you get to that point where you're like, oh, this is on me. Like, I've got some work to do on myself. That could be the opposite side of that.
For sure. I feel like at some point, the lessons that we're forced to learn ourselves begin showing up in the lives of other people. You personally, like, you've spent a ton of time, your adult life, helping people pursue change, whether it's health, performance, confidence, or some other goal. So when you spend enough time in that role, you start seeing patterns, right? If you're paying attention. And you're starting to see patterns that most people never get the opportunity to see. When someone first comes to you looking to improve, their health, their performance, or just life in general, what have you learned to pay attention to beyond just the obvious goals that they're talking about?
Yeah. So anytime I start with anybody, it doesn't matter what the problem is, right? Or the challenge is. So we could be talking about health. We could be talking about fitness, business, relationships. I think, people kind of want like a roadmap because they're listening to everything that's going on here. And they're like, man, this is a lot. Like, I get it, man. Like I need to do more work on myself, and I need to, focus on my family more, whatever the thing is. I think there's three things that people are constantly chasing. It's health, wealth, and relationships. Like you can kind of boil it down to that, and there's a lot of legs that come off of each one of those corners of that triangle, but it's health, wealth, and relationships. And something's always going to get the lion's share, right? And oftentimes,
Yeah.
to answer the question more specifically with where I am in, geographically, I live in the Silicon Valley, smack dab in the middle of it. And so this is a place where people are constantly chasing status and wealth for several different reasons, whatever their reasons are. So what ends up getting left behind is the relationships piece and or the health piece. And often, most of those time, the more often I'm dealing on the health side of things. And so when I start with somebody, it's usually just trying to get what is their level of awareness here on kind of what's been going on with them. And I'm never not surprised to find out like how little awareness people have about how they got to the place that they are. They know things, but they're not connecting dots. And so I think the biggest thing that I see and what I've learned is like where those gaps in awareness exist, and what people have done to overcome them. That might be making decisions about how they approach this, the person they see or talk to, the guru they go to, whatever the thing is. But it starts with a very low level of awareness of kind of their own owner's manual, if you want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Like how does your body actually function? What have you actually been doing
Yeah.
to it? What have you not been doing to it? This comes from, health and fitness is a very broad topic, and there are a lot of rabbit holes to get into. But most people just don't have a total level of awareness of kind of how they got to the state that they got to. And moreover, they have no idea what it's going to take to untangle the sticky web that often exists there to move the needle the direction that they ultimately want to, which then comes back to what I was kind of saying before about this misdirected energy and a not
Yeah.
very well-defined goal or mission. Is, it gets boiled down to something very simple, like I want to lose 25 pounds. Okay, great. Well, that's definitely something we can shoot for here, but there are a lot of other things we have to address here, and let's start there. So then you start talking to them about things that wasn't in their plan. No, dude, I just want to burn more. I just want to work out, dude. Just want to burn more calories and lose this weight. Yeah, I gotcha. And we could do that. But what we'll be doing is we will be creating a stickier web, right, without addressing these other things that are underlying to your larger problem, which is you are unhealthy, you are unfit, you do not move well, right? You have a very disconnected frame of reference for where you are now and where you want to go, but more specifically, where you've been. So from a human behaviors perspective, it never ceases to amaze me that people really haven't reflected much on that. And so in my conversations with them, like right from the very, very get-go, it's bringing awareness to the table by asking questions. The two skills I think are most important that I've ever learned in my life are question skillfully and listen carefully. I've said it before on my own show and whatever, but question skillfully and listen carefully. Start to dig, like figure out what's going on with this person, and why they're at where they're at, and what do they really think is possible, and why do they think that. You'll learn a lot about somebody, and it puts you in a much more informed position to actually be able to help them than to give them some prescription or cookie cutter formula that, yeah, it could work for a while, it works until it doesn't, kind of thing.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, you basically explained how it's important to understand the individual before trying to solve the problem, essentially. Is that predominantly coming from the training side of the house, dealing with so many people, common goals, so to say?
Yeah, I would say that. I mean, I've had the fortunate experience of being able to work with literally thousands of people, right? And so I wouldn't even begin to count the number, but it's in the tens of thousands probably at this point, right? And that would include like coaches and clients and, people within the business. And it, it's probably, you could probably relate to this, David. I mean, you go to the social gathering, whatever it is, they find out what you do, right, and who you are. And the conversation inevitably starts to go into about work, right? Whatever that is, right? And like, how do you do this?
Yeah.
And you hear wild stuff, and you're just like, dude, I'm just trying to enjoy the barbecue. Can I not, be switched on for work right now, kind of thing. And so when you talk about the people that you help or the people that you study and ask these questions of, like it kind of happens all the time. It's just you get labeled with the label that you've been labeled with, and then all of a sudden you're kind of this like resource, and there's very little boundaries in terms of when people want to access that resource. And so, in saying all that, I say that to say, look, you're all the reps that you get, in the over time. And again, for me, like I said, it's been nearly 30 years of this. Like there are definitely patterns there, and it starts with like a very surface layer of awareness of kind of where they're coming at this problem, so-called problem or question that they have. It's just not really well developed. Oftentimes, people are looking for the easy button, the magic answer, um, and the magic pill, whatever you want to call it. Like, what is the answer to the test? And before I can give you the answer to the test, I need to understand what your understanding is of the concept, and and then from there, we can talk about how that concept actually applies to you. And over time, with the age of the internet and social media and all those things, man, people are just drowning in information. And what I've really found about on the human behavior side that challenges me is the audacity that people have specifically around what they think their level or depth of knowledge is on a particular subject, whatever it happens to be, right? So if we want to keep it in
Yeah.
the health and fitness space, you haven't even read your own damn owner's manual, and you're trying to tell me why this diet, this exercise program, this whatever is the answer. And so, again, going back to patience, it takes a lot of times, it takes everything I have just to go, okay, I need you to shut your mouth for a second because you're about to get schooled on all the things that you don't know, and you're likely going to be insulted. I'm not trying to do that, but let's talk about a few things first. Because, first off, where did you hear that? And you start to find out where they're getting their information from. And it's like, okay, well, I heard that too from that same person, right? And let me tell you, like, what that means for you based on the information that you've given me, because we are not even in the same, we're
Yeah.
not even in the parking lot of the ballpark right now, with regard to how this could be applied or how this could help you. So again, the audacity, like this, the over self-confidence that people have, the belief systems and
Mm.
how they're structured and what they're structured around, really challenges me. At the same time, I'm very aware of it. So I go
Yeah.
in kind of guarded in a sense with regard to how I approach things. And some people think I'm like beating around the bush when they ask me a question, and I'm like, yeah, dude, I've heard this term used before. Like, you haven't even earned a ticket to this ride. Like, you're trying to major in the margins right now, and we need to go back to the owner's manual. Let's go back to the
Yeah.
instruction manual on putting on socks and shoes or something like that. It's really that we got to get that back to the basics, and people just, I have all this information I've got from somewhere, and now this is my truth. That one is a more than ever a big challenge for me. Versus before, like when I started, people were very uneducated. They knew nothing. Like a lot of people had never stepped into a gym before. Like when I started coaching, they were, they had zero clue what they were doing. They had no experience. They had likely not been involved in any kind of physical activity in their life. Versus now, people I talk to now, they've got all this information that they're coming in with. They've had some experiences, multiple vast experiences, and there's no shortage of those now, right? So you're
Mm.
part of the untangling it again back to the awareness piece is like, okay, well, what have you been doing, and why were you making those decisions to do that, and then more importantly, like, why are you here now, and what can I do to help you, and boiling that down to understand that the individual and the person at a deep level, deeper than they probably expected walking through the door, so you can actually help them versus instruct them. Maybe you can actually coach them versus instruct them, which to me are two very different things.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit, right? Like for like your level of experience with training, so to say, and I'm using that word kind of broadly, but in relation to your experience in training, right? Like you've taught the guys that are teaching, you've instructed the guys that are instructing, you've coached the coaches. With that, why do you think so many guys struggle with that philosophy of understanding the person before the problem, number one, and then second part, what's the difference between an instructor and a coach in your mind?
Well, I think there's two very different skills there, and again, going back to like things taking the lion's share, both of those skills take a tremendous amount of practice to get good at, and so that being coaching somebody versus instructing them. So if we're kind of trying to break down like the definition of what instructor is to coach, for me, this is not what Webster says or whatever else. This is just my take on it based on my experience, right? And that's kind of a lame thing to say, but again, based on my personal experiences with what I've seen happen, right? And maybe we break this down to like, if you want to keep it really dumb, because I'm just a gym rat, kind of by trade and in my life. Yeah. You have like a group class happening, right? And then you have a personal training client. Those are two very different sessions, right? Those are two very different things. In the group training session, I have something that I'm going through, like it's a program for the day, and so basically what I'm doing is I'm delivering programming to the masses. I have all these things I need to get through, and I have a kind of a diverse bunch of or group of people in front of me, and I need to manage them through this process, right? Sequence 1, sequence 2, all the way to sequence 4, whatever it is, right? We have this many reps, this many sets, these exercises, and you need to make sure they can, at some level, do the thing that they need to be able to do it at at an appropriate intensity level, maybe get my hands on them a little bit to kind of help them through there. But I have 10 other people in this class right now that I also have to manage. I'm giving them instruction, and I'm kind of pulling them to the finish line, right? That's kind of what instruction looks like for me. Coaching is much different. And that doesn't mean, but let me go back to instruction. If you walk into my gym, I'm going to try to understand, if you're brand new, if let's say I got 8 people in a class, which is where we max out, or we cap the group, all right? It's eight, no more than 8 people in a group. That's what we're comfortable with, so that we can make sure we're staying as hands-on as we can be in that structure that I just said. Because again, you got a diverse level of people, different fitness levels, different abilities, different injuries that they might be dealing with, different mentalities, levels of grit, whatever you want to say. There's a lot of things going on there, and I have to manage that, and I have to instruct people through all those things in the process. With the coach, but I'm going to try to understand what I can understand in the period of time that I've been given, right, to understand, so that I can give you the best experience I can, keep you safe, get you fit, all those things. Personal training on the other side, of the house, is something where I'm going to understand you at a much deeper level, and there's going to be a high level of assessment that goes on here, both in verbal, like question and answers, right? Let's find out about your health history. Let's find out about where you currently are, what are your goals, what are your limitations, all the things, right? But I also want to know, like, how much are you sleeping, right? Let's talk about your nutrition. There's these questions go on, can go up to a very deep level. And then I'm going to be handling this not just on we got to get through this today. This is where we're starting today. This is where we need to get to. So I need to fill in those gaps. And every day is a new assessment. Like, where is this person being challenged? What is it that they're picking up? What is it that they're not picking up? What are the new things that pop up that we didn't initially see in that first assessment or those first couple of sessions or whatnot? And I'm constantly making adjustments very specifically for that person based on all the information that I've obtained and where I know they need to go. And that's going to be largely based in my level of knowledge, my level of experience, education, all of those things, and the human that I'm dealing with, which is, again, very dynamic, right? So with that, I am, for that person, and this is maybe one way of looking at it, what are they paying me for? They are paying me for that very specialized, maybe that's not the right word, very individualized instruction on the things that they need to do in order to get through each thing. And they're getting a high level of attention on all of those things. Now, they might only be able
Yeah.
to take on what I can give them, and that's fine, but I now have the ability to adjust that, or I should have the ability as a coach, a good coach should have the ability to adjust to that, to get the small wins where they need to be, they need to happen, and also know what this is too much, this needs to be cut out, right? This is going to be too much for this person to handle, and that varies from person to person. I don't get that in that instruction format that I was mentioning, like sort of in the group situation. I don't get that as a coach, and I also don't get that as a client. And in wrapping all that up, I'll just say this: I think like for your coach, for your coaches, part of what you're doing is making decisions that client can't make or won't make for themselves, right? Because they don't have the depth of knowledge to understand what they're doing, because they're not going to do it. They don't have the grit or the stick-to-itiveness or the motivation or any of the key or the buzzwords you want to throw in there. And at the same time, I get the opportunity to pre-plan and adjust every single thing. Versus instruction was like, this is my job today, is to get you through this thing. And so I think if we related that over to, like firearms instruction, combatives, those kind of things, I think people could kind of understand the differences of what they see happen in those situations, like who's a good coach and who's being coached, and also who's coachable, versus the other side, which is like, we got 12 guys standing on the line here or on the mat here, and we got to get through this curriculum today as a group. So we're going to be moving at the pace that needs to be dictated in order to get that done.
Right. Yeah. Well said, man. Well said. Scott, from a coaching perspective, I'm interested in hearing this from you. You've just dealt with so many clients and you have so much experience with this. When you've seen meaningful transformation actually occur, what tends to be happening beneath the surface that most people never really notice?
Trusting the process, and that is a very tough thing to do, particularly in the beginning stages. But that trust is built through the relationship building that you do. You can have the best plan in the world, but that's all it is. It's just a plan. What you need to have is there needs to be some type of a connection between you and the client. The depth of the level to which that goes, or which you allow that to go, or which the client allows that to go, is going to vary. But there has to be trust. And I think that really starts at the beginning with taking care of somebody's personal needs. And part of that, taking care of somebody's personal needs, is just letting them know that you're there and that you can be trusted, like you can be counted on, which means setting like some very specific right and left gutters or parameters on what that is. Like, if you're going to make this commitment to me, like from the client perspective to the coach needs to make one back, and let's define what this is so that everybody's comfortable with it and so that there are no surprises. I think that's super important, but it absolutely starts with trust, because if they don't trust you, they're not going to trust the process. And if you believe that your process can get them to where they want to be, then the most important thing that you can do is get them to trust you. Right, so trust is rates right up there at the top, and I mean, people look at that and they may question that. You asked me, that's my answer. If there's not a deep level of understanding, again, that comes down to that trust factor, there are just too many things missing in this process, and I can drag you through the workout from day to day. But if you're not coming in with the right intention, you don't believe that I am meeting you at the place that you are, at the level that you need to be met, it'll work until it doesn't, and there will be hitches in that process for sure. And when that happens, when somebody's not getting the result that they want, right, or they are, whatever the case is, it's all going to come back to, like, let's have a conversation about what's going on here. Like, when a client comes into the gym, like, the first thing I'm asking them about is not what they, what their last workout was. If I see them 2-3 days a week and they're working out another 2-3 days a week, like, I'm going to get to that question. I want to know how they're doing as a human being. And again, for a lot of people, that's just going to be too much. And I would say then this isn't the right job for you. It's just not. Like, there are people out there that just want to be told what to do. Yeah. Until they don't. And then what do you have? Because that happens with everybody. They have a bad day. Again, they haven't trusted the process for whatever reason, or they haven't been following the process, and then you get frustrated as a coach, and you're like, what's going on here, and maybe they're not being honest with you, they're not fully disclosing. Well, to me, going back to personal responsibility, that's on me. What questions didn't I ask? And if I did and they didn't give me that answer, that's what could I have done better, so that we're minimizing or mitigating the challenges that are inevitably going to come up along the way.
Yeah. One more question on coaching.
Okay.
When you think and reflect on the best clients that you've had, what have they taught you?
First off, I think they've given me way more.
What have you learned from them?
Yeah, way more than I deserve, with regard to trust. What they've given me, I think that like the biggest thing, the thing that charges my battery the most, or that keeps me going forward, after all of these years doing this, is when that client comes to you. We're not having a conversation about how much weight they lost, or how fast they ran that 5K in, or how much they deadlifted, or whatever else. The thing that I guess they teach me is how important everything that I just said really is. And it comes in a statement like this, where they come in and you go, man, you've changed my life. There's no way I can thank you enough for what you've done for me. And for me, I'm just like, well, you're welcome. Thank you for letting me be part of that process. You're the one that did the work. But when I ask them, I go, can you be specific? Like, how has your life changed? A lot of the times I kind of already know this because they've shared it at this point. If they've gotten to the point where they're saying something with that much weight in it, it's my relationship with my wife is better. My relationship with my kids are better. I am a better person. I am calmer. I am more fit. I am more active. I am less fearful about getting involved in things that, I'm doing things that I've never done in my life before. I didn't know how like unhealthy I really was from a psychological perspective, an emotional perspective, physical perspective, until you helped me figure this out. Those things, that's what they teach you. They teach you how important that building that relationship and having that trust, and then also continually studying your craft to actually help them achieve those things. The depth that it takes to get somebody, I think the depth of knowledge and the depth of awareness that it takes to help to ultimately get that kind of a response, unsolicited response out of somebody, means you did a lot of things the right way. And even with some of the things you probably did wrong, that maybe they know or they don't know, like in terms of mistakes that you may have made along the way with how you handled a situation or handled this part of their programming, or this block of training or whatever else. I think that what they do is they teach you, what I've learned is they teach you how important this thing is, which gives me good confidence that what we're doing and what I have done personally or professionally is the right thing. I cannot think of a bigger or better paycheck than that. Certainly, I need to be paid for the time that I spend, because that's how I put food on the table for my family. But at the same time, like, man, they also, in recognizing that, by the time you get to that, you have seen them go through a tremendous amount of struggle. And so what it also teaches you is how resilient humans are and can be, when they're focused. I mean, some people that have, I'll say this too, like the body is an amazing thing. What it will tolerate, what it will put up with.
Yeah.
Like on the negative side, like you've eaten like a trash pan at a raccoon your whole life, right? You drink too much, you don't sleep, you work too much, like you're abusing yourself for 40 years chasing status, and you've reached the peak of whatever that is at, I don't know, Google, Meta, whatever, because that's all that's to Apple. It's like a stone's throw from where I'm at. And the whole time you just ruined your body, right? And that has downstream effects, right? Hormones and brain function and all that stuff, your sexual function, things that they share with you that come up, in these processes. Yeah. And so when they come to you and they make a statement like that, and you understand, like, they have untangled this sticky web and now they recognize it. They teach you how important being patient with somebody is, and again, studying the craft and studying the things that can actually help people solve problems for themselves, sometimes without them knowing it, and organizing it in a way that makes sense. Man, it's super rewarding. It's what keeps me coming back. Because I'm certainly not a
That's
bazillionaire
awesome.
doing this. That's for dang sure. It's a labor of love for sure. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, man,
It's
without a doubt.
insane. It's crazy. It's crazy what I see and deal with. I'm like, holy God, how's your shoulder even still working after all of this? Man, this isn't interesting or whatever. Like, how's your heart and lungs even still pumping?
Yeah,
Right? Like, okay.
it's mind
Well, we got
blowing.
nowhere to go, but getting better. So let's get going. Yeah.
100%. When you see a crackhead sprint 3 blocks, jumping fences, it's like, dude, you haven't had a real meal in a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Humans are
um,
amazing beings.
incredible. Scott, one of the advantages I'd argue of spending decades helping people pursue change is that you essentially get a front row seat to both success and failure. So you can learn a lot if you're paying attention. You've seen people transform their lives, and you've seen others remain stuck, undoubtedly, despite having access to great coaches like you and information, opportunity, and support. I kind of want to explore some of the patterns that you've observed along the way in relation to that, right? Because if we can identify common behaviors, common patterns of behavior that we can correlate, lead to failure, so to say, or stagnation, we know what to avoid. So when people say that they want to change but never seem to actually make progress doing so, what patterns tend to show up most often from your opinion?
Well, again, going back to the awareness piece, if you're going to be aware, that means you have to do some soul searching, oftentimes. And I think so. People like to be comfortable. I mean, human beings, just by nature, that's just what we're going to do. It is hard coded in our DNA, like to survive, right? And at the same time, be comfortable. Like, what is homeostasis, right? Is if you want to start getting sciencey, like, what is comfortable? I want to be a certain temperature. I don't want to be too hot. Don't want to be too cold, right? Like, there's comforts in life. There's this human condition, if you will, of and there's other things I think that pop up, with that when people are trying to find that normal for them. I think
Yeah.
the people that are the most successful, oftentimes are the ones that have to come through the biggest struggles. I think having to, whether it's in life or in business or whatever, and I've worked with, man, so many different people for so many things. I think and again, here at Red Dot Fitness, it's again a lot of high achievers. We're a little higher ticket item, so there has to be some discretionary income there. And what that means is people have had to work their way up through the ranks, or they're entrepreneurs, or whatever else. And the most successful people, like from a fitness perspective, for me, have also been the people that have had to struggle in life, like through relationships, through business, whatever. They had to sleep on a couch and eat, you know, rice and beans for a while, right?
Yeah.
And not be able to make that car payment, or be late on a credit card payment and those kind of things, and be forced with challenges that were not comfortable. So from the transformation perspective, I see that as I don't want to say it's a necessity, but it's almost kind of a prerequisite. If you really want to make this change, like, you have to understand what being uncomfortable is. And a
Yeah.
lot of times we see the other side of that, where people have zero clue. They have at best dealt with first world problems their entire life. However you want to define that. More and more, these days, especially, I think people expect to be taken care of. I pay taxes. I work for this company. There's just a lot of things that are kind of handed to them, and they haven't had to make really hard decisions or be in a really tough place. And that gives them a very skewed perspective when it comes to unwinding the thing that's ultimately going to transform them into whatever it is that they want, or the thing, get to the place that they want to be. I think so. I think that's one thing, is the struggle is an important thing. And
Yeah.
it's the people that have struggled the most. I mean, I could cite dozens of examples, but you know, loss of limbs, loss of life in their life, like loss of jobs and things like that. Like those are the type of people. Like, there's some people here that have been in some really traumatic accidents that
Hmm.
completely change them. They come in here 4 or 5 days a week. They are they never complain, ever, right? They never bitch. It's just, we're going to get work done today. They're happy to do it. There's a smile on their face. They're conversational about it. They don't have unrealistic expectations because I think they realize what the other side is, right? Like, this is not hard, right? We don't need to overcomplicate this. I get that I can't do certain things, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But what I really understand is what I can do, and I'm going to do that, right? And that they're really good at identifying and then communicating those things. Like, I'm struggling with this. They're not afraid to say that. Or, like, I'm going to be honest with you, like, I messed up last weekend. I fell off the plan. Good, fine. But I'm back on it now. Like, they recognize what really being on versus being off means. And they understand what that impact is kind of on the short and the long term, right? They're not happy about it, but they're also not beating themselves up about it. They're recognizing there's an opportunity here, and let's get after it. Those are patterns that I have certainly seen. But the same, you could look at the flip side of all that, and I kind of alluded to that. Like, there are people that come in here that because they're paying, they expect to get a result, right? Whatever that result is.
Yeah.
And there's frustration in that when they don't, because they're not willing to put in the work that it really takes to get it done. And their idea of what that work is very skewed. And if I'm painting like a very specific picture, okay, so you've committed to 2 workouts a week, 4 weeks out of the month. So that's 8 workouts, right? But something comes up, right? So something comes up. You have this social event you need to go to, so you can't do 1 workout, all right? So you just cut 1 out, right? Then something else comes up. Well, I have this appointment that I've had on the schedule for months to get my hair done or my nails done or whatever the hell, right? So you cut another one out, right? So right now you've just cut out 25% of the time that you committed, which wasn't very much anyways, right? And you're willing to commit little to none on the backside of it on those other 22 days during the month, right, to get anything done. And when you do that, when you do make a commitment, you're maybe 50%, on top of that stuff when you do it. So if you did some weird math on the back of a napkin or whatever, what you're going to find out is people are basically getting 50% done of what they committed to doing, but they have an expectation of achieving this thing. So they are not trusting the process, they are not following the process, and they're not being honest with themselves. I think the failure rate on you're not being honest with yourself, and if you can't be honest with yourself, then I'm not going to expect you to be honest with me, kind of thing. I'm not going to be frustrated by that. I'm not going to get mad about that. That's tough for trainers that really care, because they internalize it. They're like, this person isn't getting the result, and I just want them to be better. I mean, we've had people that have, again, paid to get fit, don't do the things, and wind up in the hospital, with a heart attack or stroke or something that it was totally preventable if they just did the things that my coaches or me or whoever is working really hard to help them achieve. So there's a flip side to that. That is certainly a pattern, is paying for something, expecting you're going to get, and maybe we flip the script a little bit, maybe capability. I paid to go to this course. I paid for this class. I paid for this new, fancy toy, this new optic, this new blade, this new, handgun, whatever it is. Like, I have paid for this. I've made this investment. I should expect that I get this thing out of it. And it couldn't be any further from the truth. That's an interesting one for me. So those are patterns that I see. And that's why it was so easily relatable kind of when I jumped into the space with the podcast and whatever, and kind of seeing where people were coming at this from. I'm like, this is the same. This is the same as the fitness world in a lot of ways. It's really interesting to me. And I could kind of see it coming before it happened and pick it up as it was happening.
If you could name, in relation to that, if you could name a couple of root characteristics, root causes, root attributes that cause that, what would you say they are?
Yeah, like human attributes to causing the success or the failure part. That's the
stagnation.
Yeah, the disconnect part. Yeah, I think it's expecting somebody else to do the thing for you, or that kind of that easy button, looking for. And I think this actually comes up. Maybe it's like looking for efficiency, but it's not really. It's looking for the answers to the test. And where does that come from? I think that comes from like comparison, the comparison game, which to me is an evil bitch. You're constantly comparing yourself to somebody else, and you're constantly comparing your problem to somebody else's problem or your result to somebody else's result. And in the fitness world, that's really easy. Well, Susie, my friend, lost 10 pounds doing this diet or taking this pill or doing this workout. And so if she did it, I can do it. You are not Susie, right? You are Mary, right? And Mary is in a much different situation. Let's not even pretend we understand what Susie's situation is. Okay, she chose this thing, she did this thing. That's what you know about that. But what else was there? Because I don't know anything about that. To say that that's the answer for you is foolish. So, and that's the best way I can put it. That's a foolish approach to solving your problem. I understand that you may have been motivated by this, and that at some level this may make sense to you, but we have to understand a little bit more before we make prescription on what is the right thing. And maybe Susie's plan is a great plan for you. I don't know, but you've just adopted that because you see an end result, an end state, rather than being process focused. And in order to understand what the process is, you have to understand yourself. So I think this comes down to this game of comparison that people are constantly making, and I think they get lost in it. And again, going back to this age of information, if we're even still calling it that, like people are just drowning in it. They're just seeing all these things and hearing all these things all the time. And they're not doing a good job at kind of just reflecting on, well, how does that apply to me? And if you have no knowledge base for how that even might apply to you, it puts people, I feel bad for people to some extent, right? Like part of me, there's a little empathy there, like you just don't even know. And that's okay. Let me help you with that. Well, I can help you with that, but you have to be willing to be helped and not having major decision about how you're going to get from point A to point Z, without any knowledge of the B through, Y's. That's a,
Right.
That's a, I think that's where that comes from, man, is, people just constantly like, I want this. I want to be like that. I want this. This person has done it. They have the formula. I'm going to go do it that way. It's very tough. People are in a really tough position, I think, in terms of making decisions about stuff as a result. And they're just drowning in that stuff now. There's no shortage of it. You get it everywhere.
For sure. All right. I'd like to take a second and talk about one of our partners, GripKeeper. So their line of products are great for building out your dry fire practice program. Their trainers match the vast majority of existing setups and let you work real reps, draw, grip, trigger control at speed, etc., all in the comfort of your own training space. The team and I think it's a great supplemental tool for incorporating in your dry practice and just increasing the overall volume of reps that you can get. So definitely check them out. Go to gripkeeper.com, and if you make a purchase, take advantage of our partnership code, AHT10, to save a little coin on making your purchase. As always, we're grateful for your guys' willingness to support the companies that support us. Thanks. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine. His name is Tanner. And he goes, Dave, have you ever heard the quote, comparison is the thief of joy? Mm-hmm. Like, no, I've never heard that one, but it makes perfect sense. Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
It's very true. I mean, I see it here quite frequently. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important, like, hey, like if we can recognize like laziness, right? A lack of commitment, whatever you want to call it, like that's not a good attribute. And the more you practice that, the better you get at doing the wrong things, so to say. Be careful what you practice.
Yeah, there's something there about structure too, and where you've gotten your structure from. So I'd say that too is like people lack structure. Somebody else has put the structure in front of them. They've ever actually had to create that structure on their own. And in order to get anything, I think worthwhile in life, particularly in your health and fitness, there has to be a structure established, and it's not going to be the same for everybody else. And so again, like you have picked one piece, like in the Susie Mary example, like you picked one piece, one component of a lot of components, right, that could be part of your structure, but you haven't put any thought as like, okay, well, Susie was going to Orange Theory 5 days a week. You just got done telling me you got 3 kids, they're all involved in something, you work full-time or part-time or whatever else, and you told me like the only thing you can commit to is maybe 2 days a week, and that's going to be like Tuesdays at 8 a.m. and Thursdays at 3 p.m., between soccer drop-offs or whatever. Yeah. We haven't even got to the point where we can even start to discussing like the structure of this because we already have these limitations. Like, what are those? So I think a lot of people have been given structure in employment, right, in life as kids. Everything's like been taken care of for them, right? It's like you do this, then you do
Yeah.
this, and then they're faced with having to create that structure on their own or restructure it for that matter, and they don't have any clue, they don't have any answers for that, and so they're just picking pieces and they're trying to connect dots, and they're just not very good at it, or again they lack
Yeah.
a depth of knowledge or understanding of how to do that for them, which comes back to the coaching piece, I guess.
In relation to what what you've brought up repeatedly, kind of a reoccurring theme in relation to awareness, both as the coach and the client. So, have you seen where there is there's a difference between perception and reality?
Hmm.
Have you seen where like the real obstacle is actually different from the perceived obstacle that the client is believing that they're facing?
For sure. I mean, if we just even take this back to like what the body is capable of, like the mind and the body are capable of, I think again, if you've done hard things in your life, you may have a better connection to that. But if you haven't, like there's I think that gap gets wider between perception and reality, and it goes both ways. I mean, I think people sometimes think they're in way worse shape than they are, and when I say shape, that can come in all shapes and sizes, psychologically, emotionally, physically, whatever. And again, I think that roots back to comparison. Like they're like I don't have it as bad as this person, or I'm not as bad as this person is, and so forth. I think the man, I guess if you're trying to unwind that a little bit, what people when people see what's possible and they understand what's possible, and sometimes they don't understand what they've achieved until it's been brought to them, right? Because they're trying
Yeah.
to create structure, they're trying to understand process, they want this end result, and again, connecting dots and putting all the things together, like they need to be told, like again, this is just an example from the business would be like if I've got somebody that's coming in, like there needs to be a they need to be told kind of high level, like here's what you should expect over the next 2 to 4 weeks, right? And it's not things that are typically, it's not going to be, you're not going to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. It's not going to happen. Like here's probably what's going to happen. Like you're going to be a little sore, right? Because you haven't done this ever, or you haven't done this in a long time. That's a natural part of the process. That will get better as we go, right? After the first week, what you'll probably start recognizing is the soreness is going to dissipate a little bit. You're probably going to start feeling a bit more fatigued by the end of the day, which means when your head hits the pillow at night, you might sleep a little deeper, right? And when you wake up in the morning, you might feel a little bit more energy. Those are things to be paying attention to, right? That means
Yeah.
the the internal things, and this is what I try to get across to people. The physiological always precedes the physical. And so they again, not understanding their owner's manual or whatever else, like they need to be told kind of what's going to happen or what they should expect. And there's never one thing or one like pathway that this or a simple way to explain this for everybody because everybody's a little bit different. But here's what you should expect. And then as they're going through that process, letting them know, like it could be as simple as something as like, hey, remember when we were using those 12.5 pound dumbbells last week? Remember how shaky you were, right? Remember how like awkward and uncoordinated you felt? Well, you just pushed 20s for the same amount of reps. And while I know that was challenging for you, there's no way you would have been able to do that before. Let me explain to you kind of what's happening there and what you should expect going forward. So again, when they don't understand what's possible and when those things are happening, they are not being brought to the forefront for them to kind of realize, and they're just constantly focused on this end state of where they're trying to get to. There is a breakdown in that structure in that process, and there are things that happen. So again, perception is I'm not where I need to be. The reality is you have now taken several steps forward, and here's how that's happening for you. Here's what you should expect going forward. And while there is no way for me to tell you exactly how this is going to go, the progress we're making right now is really important. I want you to understand that was a huge win today. And I want you to know how this is going to stack as we stack these wins over time to get you to where you ultimately want to go. Now, that's a very rudimentary explanation, but I think that's how it goes in life, too. Let's go back to my 24-year-old daughter. As she's going through these things in her life, new jobs, new schools, things like that. And the points in time where she's really frustrated with herself, really frustrated about what's going on around her, whatever the case, like, hey, sweetheart, like, I know that sucks. Ask me how I know, right? Because I've been there and I've seen
Yeah.
this so many times. And I get, but think about this. Think about what you just learned in that process, right? And think about how you can use that now going forward. And so when I go back to like my conversations with her now, her being able to reflect back and be aware of that and go, hey, you told me this once, and God, that just came true today. Like it was so interesting. Like it was like deja vu. Like this, and Dad, I saw it happening before it even happened. So like I wasn't mad about it. I didn't get upset about it. I wasn't, and at the same time, like I wasn't even overexcited about it or whatever else. Like that perception gets changed very quickly in reality if we're setting people up for success that way. That might be very esoteric. I don't know.
That's great.
But I think in many things in life, whether that's being a parent, whether that's being a kid, whether that's being from a business perspective at a job, or whether it's in the gym or anything else, like I think people need to be made more aware of that more frequently. And it takes a coach
Yeah.
or somebody that's got some wherewithal, to be able to recognize those things. And the only way you're going to recognize those in your clients, if you're, or the people that you're coaching, because you're constantly trying to help them, right? And you're constantly checking in, and you're constantly seeing
Yeah.
that there's a constant assessment of that and helping them assess themselves.
Yeah. Well said. Let me ask you this from your analytical mind and your experience. Looking back, when you've seen the times that you've seen, the amount of times that you've seen, when you've seen someone finally break through after years of struggling, what was usually one of the first things that changed in them?
Humility and humbleness, I think, are one of those, or a couple of those things. Like they're just like, oh,
Yeah.
now I get it. And there's just like a different attitude or even affect that you can kind of see on them. Like that doesn't generally come without disappointment and frustration. So they can kind of reflect back on that and kind of chuckle about it a little bit, maybe even, or but it's this, oh, it's like that aha moment. Like, now I get it. Like I get what you were telling me. It didn't register before, or I didn't really understand why I was doing what I was doing, but now I can see it. And what that does is just, I don't know, maybe we use the BJJ example. You talk to any black belt, right? And when they finally, the two things happen, I think, when that happens. This has been my experience. I am not a black belt in BJJ, but what I've seen when that happens, and when I talk to BJJ black belts, is first thing when that thing gets tied around their waist, for the first time they go, it's usually like, I worked really hard, I'm really proud, but I don't think I'm ready. Like, I don't think I'm supposed to be here, right? And then the second thing that happens is they recognize my journey has just begun, right? Now I understand what I don't understand, or I didn't understand, and now it's this constant practice to constantly refine the thing and learn more and do more and explore more. And so I think, like, again, sort of going back to that inflection point when somebody's finally made it or finally achieved the thing, there's that moment of I did it. And I think it's important to recognize that, like I'm horrible at that, by the way. That's one of the things I struggle the most with, is like finding some success and executing the plan, getting there, and then celebrating it. Again, this is something, CC's like this too. We're just like, no, this was our plan. Like, now what's next? Like, we did the thing, like, now what's next? And we've already been planning that. So there's no room to like pause and think about it. Like, we're already on to the next thing, whatever that happens to be. But I think it's important to recognize it, acknowledge it, and then again at the same time be like, okay, now what's next for me? I haven't arrived. I've just arrived at this stage. Like, what is the next stage? But so when those people kind of achieve it, they're recognizing like, well, what else is possible? What can I do? And sometimes they have a little bit of an idea in their head, but sometimes they have no clue. And they're searching for answers. I think that was kind of me at certain stages of my life. Like, okay, I've kind of achieved what I thought would be the ultimate pinnacle, but I'm not satisfied with this. That is definitely for the people that have worked hard, that have gone through the struggle and whatever. I think it's very common for them to never be satisfied, and I think some people would look at that as a character flaw. I think being satisfied is an interesting, what is satisfaction, right? Like what does that mean? I'm satisfied that I put in the work and I achieved the thing, and knowing that there were more levels to this, and now I'm prepared to maybe move to the next level. Is a satisfaction like I'm done. I've arrived, I'm here, and I should be recognized and acknowledged and trusted and respected and all of those things. Because most of that stuff's ultimately short lived, especially on the fitness side, especially if you're like trying to peak for something, right? Like you peaked, like maintaining peak performance is very short lived, right? No matter how you slice it, like, because something had to give in order for you to get there, right? And you're going to need to work that back. So again, going back to triangles, it's either aesthetics, it's performance, or longevity. If I am focused purely on performance, the aesthetics piece might be a part of that on the fitness side. Like it might come along with the territory, but the longevity piece probably had to be compromised a little bit, and you're probably feeling that right now. And now we need to go back and focus on that a little bit. So that means the performance might dip, and if we're focused on aesthetics, like, well, longevity and performance probably going to dip a little bit. How do I balance all this? That's like the aha moment. Like it's like, okay, what do I need to be focused on now?
Agreed. Very well said. Great analogies. I think many of the same patterns, and you may agree or may not, but many of the same patterns that determine personal growth end up showing up in leadership. Mm-hmm. And over the years, admittedly, you've worked for great leaders, some poor leaders. You've built teams yourself and watched countless others attempt to influence people. I think that perspective creates a unique vantage point on understanding leadership and trust. When you think about the best leaders that you've encountered throughout your life, what qualities would you say consistently stood out to you?
I actually think we've mentioned quite a bit of this already through here, but I'll start this answer by saying I have been, in my own estimation, a very good leader at times, and I've been a very poor leader at times, and I only know that because at some point it gets very real, and it's not something that I've found internally. It's something that happened externally that I had to recognize. Again, going back to taking responsibility for. So you can take credit for the wins, but I'll take credit for the losses. When I think back about the people that I've learned the most from a good leadership perspective, I think a lot of the themes that we've talked about have been a major part of that. One of those is the struggle. The best leaders I've ever worked for struggled, right? They started on the bottom and they worked their way up. And they never forgot where they came from, ever. And they never took it for granted that where they were or they're currently sitting or arrived from a leadership perspective. I think the struggle is an important part, like doing all the things and failing and succeeding at things along the way and having to learn lessons. I think the other part is keeping a finger on the pulse of what's happening through all the levels underneath you. If you're in a leadership role, then you're going to have, subordinates or reporting structure, and keeping a finger on the pulse of what's going on. I had a leader in the fitness industry once who I highly respected because, number one, he was about taking care of people. He really wanted the best for people, and I think that was another strong leadership quality. Is like he could see what people needed, and he really tried his best with whatever his limitations to give them what they needed in order to be successful. He recognized strengths, he recognized weaknesses, but he, like in the fitness industry, like this guy could have very, very much sat in his leather chair with his, solid oak desk, in his corner office or whatever, on the 36th floor or whatever it was, and just called shots from there. But this guy was out in the field constantly, and making sure that he was touching, had all the touch points from the person that cleaned the locker rooms to the person that ran the club, to the regional director who, handled sales for that region, to the personal training directors, to all the people, and then would take that back to the office. And that's how he based his decisions, was just on a spreadsheet or something like that. So I really respected that about that guy. He also had a quote unquote open door policy. If you needed to talk to him, he would make himself available to you. Now, it didn't mean it was going to happen right away, but he wanted to hear. Like he would give you time. That was another like very distinct quality, and I recognized how important that was for me. And so I remembered that going forward. Like, look, I might not look available all the time because I'm not, right? But if we want to schedule some time, I want to hear what you have to say, and I will match your energy in whatever way I can. He also did the and one on everything. So if he made a commitment to doing something, he always took like an extra step. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. There was always kind of that extra thing that he did that really made that impression or that thing that you were asking for or needed from him that kind of much sweeter, which I think, again, from a respect level, just kept that respect level certainly super high for me, and I know other people that worked around him and with him. Um, the other, I think again, keeping the finger on the pulse being the important part. The other thing, that I watched him do was he practiced what he preached. I mean, this guy was the vice president of a very large fitness company, and I worked with a lot of vice presidents, and I worked with a lot of CEOs, too many CEOs, which is the reason I ended up leaving the company in the last place. Right? It was like, I don't have energy for this again. Right? We were not aligned on goals, values, anything here. But this guy was like, he was fit. He was an ex-Marine. I remember that. Not just because he had the proverbial USMC tattooed on his arm, but because he would often reflect on his the leadership things that he learned there from poor and good leaders, which was valuable to me because they were very relatable. I think sometimes those can be overdone, but he always did a really good job of connecting the dots on that stuff. But he was fit, very fit. In his mid 60s, the guy was out there. He would kite surf, which was his thing, which is very physical. And he was still lifting weights. He would show up to the gyms and work out on the floor with everybody else that was working out on the floor. Right, the guy just stayed in shape. His diet was impeccable. He looked the part. He looked cool. When he walked in the room, he was an older man, but he was like, dude, when I'm 64, 65 years old, I want to look like that dude. Right? And there was a certain amount of command presence that he had when he came in. Those were all things that really stood out to me as I was in my very formidable years in early leadership, on the business side of things that really stuck out to me. Patience. I saw the guy get angry a couple of times, but I never saw him lose it. It was very controlled. And I really respected that about him because there were a few incidents where like this guy, this is going to sound terrible. One particular one, the dude there was a dude acting up. He deserved to get punched in the mouth. Like that's the only thing that's going to get this guy's attention. And I don't know that I could have been the better man and not done it, but he sat there, held it together, and ultimately quelled the situation and got it taken care of. And he could have and probably handled himself just fine. My point in saying that is he had this resolve where he got to a certain point. He recognized he was at a point, and he could pull himself back. All things that I took away from that guy. I honestly can't say I ever saw that guy make a poor decision. And in one of my darkest moments, again, a realization, and I mentioned that to you, I missed a year of my daughter's life. At the time, I had the whole southeastern seaboard of the company. So I was basically covering everything from Texas over to Florida up to North Carolina. I live in California. HQ is in Chicago, Illinois. So I was on the road constantly, and when the realization came that I need to get back to the West Coast as quickly as I can so I can start to unwind this sticky web that I was in and ultimately exit the company, I was able to make a phone call to that guy, and he fully understood where I was coming from, who I was, the performance metrics that I had met. Like he wanted to help me, and he did. He got me back to where I needed to be to start to put my life together in the way it needed to be, and he sent me on my way with a handshake and a thank you when I ultimately left the company. And so I remember those are things like because he knew I was moving on to what I needed to do and what was better for me at the time, and that my time at the company was over. So I think there was a lot of things in there, and that's just one guy. There's been others, but that just there was trust, there was respect, there was structure. And this is one thing I would add too. That dude knew how to put the right people in certain rooms together to get things accomplished. Like if there was a project or a problem or whatever, and I was one of those guys, I was a fixer, if you will, like he would seemingly be able to just put the right people in the right places and then step back and just watch the thing happen. And then just provide support, where it needed. It was uncanny to me, his ability to do that in a very large company with a lot of people and a lot of problems, a lot of things to solve. So, all huge takeaways for me.
That's awesome. Scott, to contrast that, I'm going to ask you what patterns you've observed as far as noticing specific behaviors, trends, patterns that showed up before you observed leadership start to fail.
Not being present, I think, is one of the big ones. Kind of disappearing when things are chaotic. I think great leaders are there when the chaos is there. There needs to be. There are certain people that need that to happen. Organizationally, you're going to have people in your organization that they're going to be looking for that leader, and not every organization has a lot of those. So somebody needs to be there at the helm and take charge. And sometimes it's not even what they say; it's just being there and being present, and so that you know that. And again, I just gave you my full experience with this guy. Like knowing that there's a capable person there that is not afraid to stand in the face of chaos, make decisions, not be afraid to make those decisions, and give confidence to the group when things are bad or when things are rough, and that person isn't present. I think that's a red flag.
Yeah,
I think the other thing is not. It goes back to the keeping the finger on the pulse, is not being present, but only being present for like this very small group of people that are like ultimately the decision makers. And when that happens, you're basically pulling those people out of being in the field with their finger on the pulse and being that figurehead or that person for the person that needs it. And some people don't need that, right? Some people just need to see that you're there, like they are, ready to stand and fight or solve the problem or, deal with the chaos as it comes, because you are experienced and you know where you fit in the lineup here, and you just need the head coach, right, to be there with you so that you're not so there's at least somebody there shoulder to shoulder at some level, right? So I think that was a big one. The other thing that I saw was just it goes back to not taking personal responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. Well, this guy sucks because of these reasons. Well, if he's directly reporting to you, man, that's your problem. That's your fault until it isn't. What is the issue? Is the guy capable or not capable, right? Well, then is it a training issue, or is it like he just doesn't have it? In which case, if he's gone this long and he doesn't have it or he's not trained, that's on you. That is your fault. Is he not on the bus, right? Like he's just not bought into the program. Well, have you assessed what that is, what those reasons are? Like, is it a trust factor? Is it, like, again, this guy is not capable and he knows that, and he's fearful he's going to fail because he's already failing? Like, there's some decisions that need to be made here. When those things keep getting prolonged, like, that's just cancerous. And, like, I watched that. I found myself, again, it was another CEO change, which meant another senior leadership change. I wound up with a vice president who was incompetent, had no idea what he was doing. The job was way too big for him, and it very, very much trickled down to, again, like me being pulled into this tight room where this is not where the business is happening. This is not where we need to be right now. We're spending time teaching you how this business runs when our people out there are struggling. We need to get back out there.
Right.
Like that's where the work needs to happen. And I think anybody that's unwilling or unable to do that has zero business being in a leadership position. Zero. And because ultimately, it's not just ultimately they're going to fail, but a lot of other people have to fail underneath them first for that to ultimately be exposed, and then for that person to maybe be moved on or moved out. And that is that's a dangerous thing for an organization or a family unit or a team or whatever else to have. I think those are the things that come to mind for me. They're not. These are not. These are not business problems. These are human problems. And I think, when you look at the humans that are the great leaders, you're going to find, generally speaking, you're going to find good human beings. And when you're constantly pointing the finger, you're not present, you're hiding, that's a human issue. That's not a that's not a structure 100%. Problem. Yeah, it's not a structure problem. That's a human issue. And then you need to look inside that structure where that started. What's the root cause of this stuff? That needs to be rooted out, and eliminated if you want to see any kind of change or any kind of, repositioning of leadership.
Yeah, spot on. And I love that is consistent across the board, irrespective of what walk of life, what field, what domain. Scott, in regards to trust, because you've brought it up several times, throughout this conversation, how is trust, in your opinion, actually earned? And what do people misunderstand oftentimes about how it's built?
I think it's two words: honesty. And then you got to be honest with yourself if you're going to be honest with somebody else. That is a foundation of trust. Transparency, I think, is really important. I think there are limits to that depending on what the situation is and whatever. Not everybody needs to know everything, but you need to give them enough and to do whatever the thing is, or overcome the thing, whatever the thing is. They don't necessarily need all the answers or all the information, but they need to know that you are being as transparent as you can with the things that you're able to be transparent about. So that's very broad, but I think when you look at different things, like whether it's being a dad and being transparent with your son, there are certain things that I know are appropriate to tell him or give him, and there are things that aren't. So how do I give him the information he needs right now, from an appropriate that's appropriate to give him, but also gives him an understanding that I am sharing with him as much as I can, or as much as I'm able to for this particular situation, is one thing. So it's the honesty piece and the transparency piece, and I think they work hand in hand. Because if you don't have those things and somebody is questioning your honesty, even if you've tried to be as transparent as you possibly can, you're not going to have the trust. It's just not going to be there. I think part of the other thing there is on the trust side is there's got to be a consistency to this pattern, right? Of being, we talk about patterns, you have to, that trust has to show up in different ways. And I just recently had an experience with let's just say a special operations unit, and these folks had just come through a basic training course, right? And so let's call it a selection course. And during that time, the cadre was doing what cadre do during a basic selection course. You are getting tested every moment, every minute, every second of every day, and you are being pushed to your limits. And there's lots of things being evaluated during that part. Well, this group had moved on to the next section, let's call it phase 2, and the cadre had basically kind of changed the hat, right? Okay, you've made it through here. You saw a certain side of us in a certain way, and now we are going to be working with you more from a mentorship perspective. So we are going to take care of you. And part of that process was sharing personal information about themselves and getting personal information back to build a relationship and build that trust between now these people they still have a process to make it through, but now you are not being selected to be part of the process. Where you are is you're still in the selection process, but you are going to be standing by my shoulder, right? We are going to have to do things together, and I'm going to need to understand that we understand one another. And part of that is that personal relationship. It needs to be kept professional, but I'm going to share some things with you. And I think part of that is being able to be transparent in who you are as a human. And that starts with being a good human, right? Is a very important part of that trust building process. So disclosure needs to be metered, but at the same time, I think it's very necessary in terms of building that trust. I'm not talking about telling stories. I'm talking about telling people about who you are as a person. What are your belief systems? What's important to you, and how does that relate to the team in this case, or to this business or this operation? And when I say operation, I mean the business operation or something like that. I'm not talking tactically or anything like that. That's what I mean. So again, that roots back to family too. In what you're dealing with your spouse, with your brother, with your kid, whatever else. I think that stuff is important. Help me understand what's going on with you right now, man. Because it can be very transactional, and I don't think you build a lot of trust in transactions. I think it needs to go to a deeper level.
Yeah. Dude, so one of the reoccurring themes I'm seeing throughout this discussion is that of observation. You're seeing patterns, identifying gaps, and then diagnosing, right, and remedying through what you think right looks like. What did you see happening between the health and fitness world and the firearms first responder community that essentially convinced you that there was a conversation worth creating?
When I entered into that space as a student, right, and because I recognized I had deficiencies and I didn't like the way that felt. My competency and on things that I thought I understood were brought to my attention very, very quickly. And I was like, oh boy, like this is not good. I don't like the way this feels. I need to fix this problem. And so when I entered into the space, it started with going to a lot of instruction. And I would call it that. It wasn't a lot of coaching. And then I sought coaching through some like one-on-one stuff and got a little bit more out of it, but it was instruction. And so when I entered into that space and I'm standing on the line with 12, 15, however many people were there, I'm recognizing like obviously there's a diverse bunch of people and they're all here for their own reasons. And what I ended up standing next to in a lot of cases was law enforcement. And like I had what I thought was a pretty good understanding of kind of law enforcement, but some realities came into focus pretty quickly, just in terms of skill level, level of competency, and even comfort. And when I say that, just with like how people were handling their firearms, right, and what they understood about the tool at a very basic level, and then obviously about the application of the use of that tool. And I think, at some level I was a little bit shocked. I was like, oh boy, like I've been out here for like maybe a month, at this point, and I understand some things and I'd been practicing some things. And so I was putting process together with getting better. It's much like fitness, like you got to practice. There's things that, need focus, like you need to understand this thing. And as you start to do that, you become more comfortable and you can ask more questions. But what I was seeing was people struggle. But I was also seeing people make a commitment to getting better. And, when I started to ask some questions or kind of just do a little bit more observation at these places, because it wasn't just about me studying the gun, right, and the thing that we were doing on paper or steel or whatever at that time. I was watching everybody else. I was watching how they were receiving this information. And what I saw in terms of like patterns was, particularly with the law enforcement, they were doing, they could have been from different agencies, but they looked like they were doing pretty much the same thing, which was different than what I'd been getting coached on for the last month. And I was like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like they seem to have a conceptually much different understanding of how to do this thing. And then, kind of asking myself the question, it was like, well, these guys are cops, right? And they should be getting that. They've already gotten this training. They had to go through academies. They had to go through, I assume, qualifications and things like this is what I knew at the time. Does that mean the coaching that I've been getting is wrong? And I was kind of weighing that against like, well, I've been improving here based on the instruction I'm getting, and I'm watching these guys kind of struggle. So there was like this paradox that was happening for me. I was like, well, what is right, what is wrong, and what's the proper approach here? And so when I started asking questions like, well, how much training do they actually get, and what does this look like? And then at the same time, people would inevitably, you got breaks, you're jamming mags, you're doing whatever else. So people start talking, what do you do? I'm an engineer at, company X, tech at company X. I'm a doctor, I'm a nurse, I'm a mechanic, I'm a cop. I work in the fitness industry, I own a gym. So those questions start to happen. And again, like it's just like going to the barbecue or whatever, and people want to talk about all the things you do when you're not at barbecues. I was getting involved in these conversations, so I was asking questions like, so what's going on with the fitness standard like there? And some of these guys were not fit. They were very unhealthy. They didn't move well. I think naturally, I'm looking at him going, well, if this cop had to get in a foot chase with me, I'm winning that thing every time. If this cop had to get in a wrestling match with me, this is not an issue for me. This is going to be a real issue for them. And even the other people on the line. But that's the comparison game, right? Not healthy, but I think it's natural. This is what we do. This is what humans do. Mm-hmm. Not every human does it. Every human should probably spend a little bit more time understanding who the predator in the room is, in my experience, and how to identify that. But my point being is, I started recognizing there's some major gaps out there. And I'm like, this is not right? Like that was the first thing to me is like, this is not good. This is not, and it's not right. Like these are people that I respect, and I always had a high level of respect for law enforcement. I always appreciated the job. I never thought they got paid enough. because I see what they deal with on a daily basis. It happens right out here in front of my business on a daily. Like I see it, and I'm like, God, these guys, like they're not supposed to be out here managing social problems, right? They're supposed to be out here enforcing the law, right? And doing, protecting people as it says on the door panel, right? To protect and serve. But they're being called to do some really wild stuff. But my thing was like, this isn't okay. There's something very wrong with this. So part of me was like, how can I help these people? Like, as I have all this knowledge, I have this facility and whatever, what can I do to contribute to fixing this problem and leaving this thing better than I now found it? And so, to answer the question, like it kind of started there. And I was like, well, come into the gym for God's sakes. Like, let's get you on something, since it's clearly not being provided. You have no structure. You're very confused. This is not an insult. It just is what it is. Like, you're very confused. You don't understand what could be helping you, and I can help with that. Like, and I have a whole staff here that can do that. Let's figure this out. And the next thing that I was challenged by was like how many times I offered that for free, or for when I found out like you have to be careful with offering cops free stuff at a very discounted rate. How many people didn't take advantage of that? And I'm like, what is this about? Like, not wanting to be better, right? Okay, well, maybe they want it. They just don't want to commit the time to it. All right, well, how do I figure that out? So I was going through this whole process. And the more I got into this and the more I started digging, the more I learned how deficient the training process is, how deficient the curriculum is, where they're spending their time, like agencies are spending their time, where they're spending their funding, and why the deficiencies exist. And that started to trigger a lot of things for me, and it was a lot of comparison and contrasting against the fitness industry, and it looked very much the same to me, and it didn't sit well. And so as I started to try to learn more for myself, selfishly, about the shooting combatives, things like that, you start getting involved. I started going down rabbit holes, and I started asking questions of folks that I was seeing doing what I thought was a pretty good job at delivering messaging. And we're having a more intelligent conversation, in maybe in their Instagram posts or on their YouTube channel or whatever else. And so I started to study them and watch them. And the same qualities that we've already discussed were starting to resonate with me from people that I was like, hey, this person seems to be doing a really good job with this. Like, I'm not entirely sure that what they're saying is the quote unquote truth about, how to shoot better or, whatever. But the messaging is coming from, to me, like my sniffer's pretty good. I think it's coming from a pretty good place. Maybe I could ask that person some questions. And surprisingly to me, I was outreaching to people and they were willing to respond. And so what I recognized, going back to the good leadership part, the people that my gut was telling me were doing a pretty good job, and it wasn't everybody. I wasn't perfect on this by any means. I got better over time. They were also trying to help people the same way I was. And a lot of the reason they were putting this information out there was because they recognized those same deficiencies. They just understood it at a much higher level than me, and they wanted to try to make it better. And that's the person I wanted to talk to, and that's how the podcast evolved. Because I was like, well, I'm doing this podcast now as a survival mechanism on the health and fitness side to try and get my brand out there, because I'd been destroyed during this COVID process, and kind of reconnect with my sort of constituents out there in the industry, like maybe to commiserate a little bit, but also to like keep my finger on the pulse, like, well, who's being successful? What are they doing? And talk through strategies and talk health and fitness and put the brand out there. I was like, I wonder if other people would be interested in listening to this journey, so to speak, that I'm on and the things that I'm learning.
Yeah.
And that's when the After Dark episodes started to happen. And that's really what put the podcast on the map. And so my gut from the get-go, which was recognizing these things, these deficiencies, who some of the good people were that were putting out good messaging, and how they were doing that, and where they were coming from, what their backgrounds were like, the humility, the humbleness, the lack thereof sometimes, all of that. Started to understand that and really dig into what's this culture really about. And what I found is there's subcultures for days, and you need to be prepared for that. And there's these Venn diagrams that all touch these different circles. And I just wanted to talk to the people that were kind of in front of those circles in a good way. And that's kind of how the thing evolved. But I think the basis for it was it resonated with me very quickly that these people need help, and they are not first responders, and they are not getting it. And when I started to look for like, well, who's doing a good job at talking about this, I didn't find that. I couldn't find it anywhere, at least not on social media. And I didn't have a network of people to reach out to. So I had to kind of reverted to social media to figure out who that network could be. And I've slowly tried to build that over the last 6 years. And that's ultimately how we got connected, right?
Yeah.
Through another good person who was trying to help people, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, spot on. It's a worthy cause, man. So in relation to that, you've gained a ton of exposure, right? What I mean by exposure is let me qualify exposure, right? Like I would say exposure is the combination of both training and experience. Some training is firsthand, some training is inferred, right? Some experience is firsthand, some experience is inferred. But from that, you've had a lot of conversations with a myriad of people with different backgrounds. What would you say from your exposure, like when people from different backgrounds struggle to learn from one another, what do you think is usually getting in the way?
I mean, I think the word is ego. I think it's the kind of the first thing that shows up, but it's also, I think that's an easy kind of cop out to some other things that exist there. The disagreements generally happen on like 2% of the larger whole. Like there's this, whether we're talking shooting, combatives, life-saving skills. We've talked about so many things, business or whatever else. The arguments and this huge amount of time and energy gets spent talking about this very small percentage of a larger whole. It's the same in the fitness industry, right? We're majoring in the margins here, and while I'm not saying those things aren't important, right? I live in the world of possibility. When it comes to like, well, what's the reality of this, right? And so, for a lot of the things that I hear going on out there, it's like this very small percentage of what reality really is. And what people need to spend more time doing is focusing on, foundations, fundamentals, basic principles, and things like that. It's the same in fitness and health. So that was the relationship there. But I think what the exposures taught me was, and have taught me is in talking with all these people is the disagreements are understood. And I think the majority of people, I think it's important that certain people pick that thing as the thing that they are going to disagree with and try to come to the table with some rationale based on an experience and knowledge to talk about that thing. I think that drives the machine. It drives innovation. It drives thought, drives perspective, and it drives conversation. I think in the way that you do that's really important, but I also understand that people are going to do it in their way. And that way is going to work for them in whatever ways it works for them. And you need to be able to accept that and try to look past, the I don't like this guy, right? For whatever the reasons are. And that's the approach that I've tried to take too, because I've tried to be very open about this and keep this in mind for people that have zero clue who I am. Like I have zero law enforcement or military background. Like I have no skin in that game, either of those games outside of I see that there's challenges there. And I didn't see a lot of people having really solid, meaningful conversations around what those challenges are, more specifically, the solutions to those problems. And again, I referred to me as the fixer, in the past. I like to fix problems. And what I've found in fixing problems is it generally doesn't take a lot to do that when you understand what the problem actually is and what the root causes of that problem actually are. And so, again, if all we're talking about is the problem and we're not talking about the solution, I think that's where the disagreement comes, right? The solution, there's going to be nuance in that every time, and you're never going to find full agreement on that. And so anybody out there that's looking for the answer to any of it, I think they're going excuse me, they're going down a rabbit hole. They're not going to really find an answer to it. It's not about that. It's about hey, let's talk about it, because there's things that can be pulled in from these disagreements that can lead to a solution, or at least give somebody a different perspective to find the right answer for them. Going to there is no one size fits all. Back to that one. There's not a cookie cutter solution.
Absolutely. Scott, as you have spent more time around first responders, military personnel, coaches, business leaders, what common challenges have you realized that they're all essentially dealing with despite appearing different on the surface?
In the delivery of their message, or as the human being, like, delivering the message?
Yeah, both.
I think it's really, I think it's really hard for people that have maybe done something for a long time at a very high level, to step back from that, right? And try to examine like fresh or newer information or how things have changed. This was a thing for me kind of entering into this with, okay, this guy over here wore this funny hat for this particular unit, and this guy over here wore another funny hat with an insignia on it or whatever, and they both came from very specific places that did very specific things, and they had a lot of experience in a very specific type of environment. And again, if we look at this as there's no situation is ever the same, but we did this thing for this long, and it was very effective for us, right? And we have done this thing for this long, and we're very effective at it. And here's all the reasons why. I think it's tough to step back from that sometimes and examine, like, well, what about that could have been wrong, right? And or what could we have done better? And I think that's a problem, is we are looking back to like what happened then versus who are the people we're standing in front of now, or who we're trying to deliver this message to now, and how is that relevant? So I guess like the personal challenge that somebody would have would just be to, again, do a little self-examination. I think another challenge people have is that they are so convicted about whatever this thing is. Like, they just want to preach it out there, and they just want to get it out to as many people as they can. And I think that's well-intentioned, but I think they're a little bit deaf to the audience that's listening. And then when somebody challenges that deafness, if it's not agreed to, and so you either have an agreement or you have deafness. But then when you have like the challenge is met with like, you're attacking my thing. So they've taken it personally. And to me, but it's also like, I see people challenging them with personal comments. And I'm like, what is the point? Like, what are you trying to learn, or are you just trying to stir the pot? I don't have the time or the energy for any of that. I just don't get involved in any of that stuff. I've tried to remain very objective, but also somewhat like Switzerland, because I want people to have conversations with me. So if you are that convicted and you're delivering the message with this affect, right, and you're doing it with this tone or in this manner and with your little circle of people or whatever it is all the time, and it's just this constant, I don't want to call it an echo chamber, but it's this constant thing, I would not expect anybody to want to come into a conversation with you if they had any kind of a disagreement or a question that might, or a question that might challenge your belief system or whatever it is that you're doing. And I think that's a recipe for, you know, the discourse that we see a lot of times publicly. And for me, like, I was like, I don't know a way around this except to go longer form and have conversations like this, or have them on in a podcast format where context can be built into it. Like, I can ask questions objectively to try and get like where you're coming from. So it's not in a comment section or in a YouTube comment or something like that, where I'm forced to try and decipher what it is that everybody's trying to say here, and make assumptions or make guesses, or more specifically, like, choose a side. And yeah. I think that's a bigger problem, is like people are trying to plant flags in tribes or take sides because there's safety in numbers, or like, I'm on board with this now, and like, now I've been on board with it for so long, like taking a step back from it would make me, would kind of expose me to all the things that I have said in the past or supported this person on. That's just something I learned a long time ago. Like, I'm convicted on a lot of things, David. Like, there are things that I feel very confident, very sure about. And I have made public statements about that. I've tried to be careful not to bring that stuff into it, but I'll say it. But if something happens or something comes to light where I'm like, okay, well, this is clearly, the way I've been thinking about this is clearly wrong, right? Or it's clearly flawed, if you want to call it that. It doesn't necessarily have to be wrong, right? And I think that's the thing. Like, okay, my thought process, my belief system could be a little bit flawed. I have no problem saying that I've changed my mind, but I'll also tell you why, right? I'll tell you where my original thoughts came from, why I rooted my belief system, my thought or plan, my flag in this thing in the first place. what I've learned and why I've changed my mind, and I always reserve the right to change my mind again. And not being able to do that, or not putting yourself in the position to do that, I think you're backing yourself or painting yourself into a corner, and that creates this disagreement that you see out there because people are not willing to to just take a step back and go, well, maybe this guy has a point. Let me talk to him about it, or let's have a conversation. But that quote unquote even term, that let's have a conversation about it, if it's already preloaded with this is going to be an attack, like it's not really a conversation, it's a fight, right? And people are going to defend themselves. That's what people do.
Yeah, I think it ties right back to what you were saying before about awareness, right? When you say something like your take on this is wrong or flawed, is it wrong or is it flawed, right? Like, define wrong, define flawed. Is it just lacking awareness? Is there something that they're not accounting for due to a lack of exposure?
It's a great question, and I think my approach, again, coming at this from zero experience in these worlds, in a lot of cases, some experience, some exposures, is always to approach it from the position of the white belt. I have zero to prove. Like, I have a question. If I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to put some time into asking the question. And what I mean by that is just reflect, like, how do I present this question in a way? I take time to do this, and I did this a lot, like publicly in comment sections for a while, and it worked for me. I didn't get attacked, and it was actually the thing that opened up like phone calls and private DMs or text messages and ultimately podcasts, because I would say, okay, so I hear what you're saying. What I've heard other people say, or what I've learned along my process or through other people's processes, is this. And so my question is regarding this particular thing, about this particular thing, right? And that turns into a long comment, right? But at the same time, it's like I put some time and effort into thinking through how to pose this question in a way that didn't seemingly come off as an attack. It doesn't always work, right? Depending on how deep we are into this comment section and how much garbage has gone on in there at this point, and how many personal insults have been slung, whatever. But like, in trying to put it in a way, or phrase it in a way that doesn't seemingly put somebody on their heels that might already be on their heels. And sometimes it means not asking the question that way at all. Sometimes it just means like, maybe I'll try a different approach. Like, this isn't the right platform for this, or the right time and place. Maybe it's a DM. Maybe it's a phone conversation if I can get one. And that's kind of where I started with it all. I was like, okay, this guy seems sort of responsive. Maybe I could reach out to a DM and see what happens. And again, the people that really wanted to help, that kind of respected, I'm not trying to waste your time. I just have a question about this. Like, it's totally cool if you don't respond. I get you probably get a million of these things, but this is my question and the reasons why I'm asking it.
Yeah.
And that just puts the person on the other end in a position to actually give you an informed, well put together response. And that's what impressed me is like, guys that are out there like you, like, we're like, let's talk about it, and here's why. And it wasn't like you didn't seemingly made it feel like I was wasting your time, or this was a burden on you. You were genuinely trying to answer my question. And so I just found all the people and got connected by other dudes like you with other dudes like you, who were like, and people in these spaces that were willing to do that. And I'm like, these are the people that should have a voice, more of a voice, but they're also avoiding putting that stuff out there because they just don't want to get involved in the 2%, fighting that's going on about stuff that ultimately is like, we're wasting our time and our energy here.
This episode of the AHT podcast is brought to you by Attorneys on Retainer. At AHT, in our defensive and our combatives courses, we often talk about the three components of responsible preparation and decision-making in relation to the use of deadly force in defense of human life. It's the moral component, it's the tactical component, and it's the legal component. Most responsibly armed citizens spend the majority of their time thinking about the tactical component while neglecting the understanding of the legalities that follow such an encounter. And the truth is, if you're ever forced to defend yourself or someone you love from such a scenario, the situation doesn't simply end once the threat's been neutralized. There are a myriad of potential consequences that follow critical incidents, and those realities should be considered long before the conflict ever occurs. So what should essentially be a post-fight consideration quickly becomes a pre-fight or an intra-fight consideration. And the problem with that is simply this. It ties up bandwidth. It makes you slow to make a good decision and or fast to make a bad decision. Real preparation is about minimizing any uncertainties before you're ever placed in a position where you need to make decisions under stress. And that's why we've partnered with Attorneys on Retainer. Attorneys on Retainer, AOR, provides responsibly armed citizens with immediate access to experienced legal representation following self-defense incidents. This helps ensure that you're not navigating those moments all alone. Because just like any other life-saving preparedness equipment or protocols, it's far better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So, to learn more, visit attorneysonretainer.us and use our code AHT to save $25 on your membership. Yeah. And a lot of those questions that come up, I think they need to be answered with questions.
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, like, what do you think the best martial art is for fighting? Well, what do you mean by fighting? Right? Just like, what do you mean by fighting? Like, what does a fight look like to you? Mm. You know, in the shooting world, like, hey, like, what's, I want to get into shooting. Like, what's the, like, well, what do you mean you want to get into shooting? What is it? Like, what do you mean? Do you want to get into the sport of shooting? Like define shooting for me. Yeah, I'm talking about, like, I just bought a 308 AR-10 and I want to do stuff on a tripod. It's like, okay, well, there's a route for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the it goes back to having like an underdeveloped question or underdeveloped why you're asking the question, and I think it's up to the consumer, right? And this is their responsibility to think deeply about this, because a lot like that question that you just asked, like, what's the best martial art for fighting? Okay. Yeah. I can't imagine how many times you've gotten that question. And I can imagine, like, there's many times where you have to bite your lip, take a deep breath to decide if you're even going to respond to it, right? Because here's my position on that, like, Google that and see what you get back. Just take a moment before you try to take somebody's time, right, to do something. Again, if your level of commitment to actually understanding the answer to that question is so low that you won't do a little background work on your own, to take a little time to do something as simple as bang it into the little pocket computer that you have, right, in that little search bar to go, like, what's the best martial art? Because just even doing that will give you, right, some perspective on, like, oh, well, here's some answers to the question, right, that now I can, maybe that, again, gives me some perspective on how to ask the next question. So maybe it's like, okay, so it's not like what's the best martial art? Like, there's a bunch of them out there. Is it jiu-jitsu or Krav Maga, right? Why don't you put that in it? Well, put that into Google and see what it spits out, right? And take this thing to a few different or deeper levels before you start reaching out to experts. Because when you get their attention, I think you need to respect that they're even giving it to you, right? Or these influencers, whatever you want to call them, subject matter experts. I don't know. Everybody, whatever the label is, that's
pick one.
I'm supposed to use right now. I don't know, right? But whatever it is, like, if you're going to ask for their attention, respect their time, and come to them with a well-formed. Just because they have an open profile that you can DM them on doesn't mean you should. Like, think about this for a minute. It's like your kid asking you the same question over and over and over and over again. Like, look, it's your kid and you love him, but dang it, you're annoying the heck out of me right now, kid. Like, I need to take a time out, you know, kind of thing. That's kind of what I would expect it feels like on the other end, because I get that in the fitness industry all the time.
I was going to say, you probably get it in the fitness side.
It's the same thing.
Hey, man, I want to be fit. Like, how do you define fit? Yeah, like, what's your definition of fit?
Well, what does that mean? You know, what are you trying to do here, dude?
Yeah.
You know, and have you ever been 100%. Fit before? What was that? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
There's just so many things that again, people should be spending more time introspectively before they are, you know, outreaching to look for an answer to the test. You got to study, man. Like, you got to study. And the information, again, I get it. There's probably too much information out there, but it's free. And there's no excuse for somebody to not at least do some research and start to dig into this. And Instagram is not research, right? It's just, YouTube is not research. Like, it's a good place to start, to get you started on kind of where to start to look, and then dig down into that rabbit hole. It's all free. I don't think there's an
100%.
excuse for being inquisitive or being curious. Yeah, be curious on your own before you start. This is my take. Like,
Yeah.
especially
It's the Amazon Prime era mentality.
oh, for sure. Like I want it now, and I think I deserve it, and more so if I pay for it. Like I should have the answer,
Yeah.
right? I just paid to
100%.
have this answer, and here's the answer should be there. Like you know,
Yeah,
with the handout,
for sure.
it's frustrating. So I didn't want to be that guy.
Scott, let me ask you this: with all the conversations that you've had, you know, what have all those conversations taught you about the importance of like maintaining a degree of curiosity and maintaining, objectiveness and objectability and the ability to just learn from people outside your immediate circle?
Like for me, like anything you hear on the show is genuinely me. Like I am that curious guy. I do try to come in well informed. I don't script anything, right? But try to come in well informed, and I say what I said there about it being me is like I am generally curious. Like I care and I want to know, and I think a lot of other people out there do. We just went through this. Like there are a lot of people that want information, and I don't think they need more information. I think they need more access to good information. So it's not about content; it's about access, right? And finding the people that they can now focus their energy and their attention on to maybe listening to a little bit more, and who the people that person that they're listening to listens to or talks to, and finding their way into these more intelligent conversations, more academic conversations, and so forth. So that's kind of what I'm always searching for. And so when I have somebody on the other side of the table or the microphone or whatever, for me, like it's out of genuine curiosity. I have no agenda outside of learning from this person. What can you help me understand better? Because my gut told me, again, going back to even starting these episodes on the podcast is like, I think there's other people out there that would love to have this information. I just had the good fortune of being able to extract it and spend some time with this person, right, to get some really good info, right? And for some people, this might be really remedial for them, but there's always going to be value to be extracted from that. For some people, this is way over their head, and that's good. I think you need to be challenged with stuff that's way over your head, right? So that you can have you have like this spectrum of like, oh, okay, that was way beyond me. I have some things to learn, which then helps you maybe find the path to learning more and learning in a better way, whatever that is, and also avoid making mistakes, right? Like making a $600 course mistake or whatever, right? A 2-hour podcast mistake of your time, whatever happens to be. So yeah, it's
Right.
just it really is me. Like, and again, like I try to vary it. I like certain there'll be certain times where we'll kind of hit on themes that I think are like, because there's a good thread going across like a group of people or in the space on something, and there seems to be, it's not a trend in terms of like, oh, this is going to be a hot take. I've never entered into a podcast ever like with hot takes, and I think people that listen to enough podcasts and watch enough Instagram, they know like some of these podcasts are set up only for that. In fact, the AI now, like if you're subscribed to these AI platforms that will cut up your podcast into clips or whatever, they will literally scan your podcast for the hot take, the viral take. Like, and I just never entered it into it. I'm not looking for that. I am looking for like, what value can we extract from this conversation and share with people that may want it. And if we can impact, 1, 2, 3 people with this, that ends up rippling, then we have done a good thing. And that's how I hang up the mic and the headphones every single time. And it turns out, like my gut was right on that. They haven't all been bangers, right? Like not everybody loves everything that gets put out. Like I get it. But I put 100% into every single one, trying to make it the best I can for the people that want to listen to that. I get that not everybody wants to listen to it. I'm not expecting that. But like for the people that do and do invest their time in it, like I have a responsibility in my mind. Again, going back to personal responsibility, I have a personal responsibility to try to make this as valuable as I possibly can. And a lot of people, I'm sure, hang up after listening to 10 minutes and go, "This dude Scott is an idiot. He doesn't understand this at all." Yeah, that's the point. I am trying to understand it better, which then sets me up for the next conversation with the next group of people or the next person to ask the more informed question that maybe hits that audience in a different way. That's just been my
Yeah.
approach the whole time. I hope that's what people get from it. I don't know.
I love it. And on that, I kind of want to get some perspective from you from being the guy on the other side of the mic, right? Like when I reached out to you, which was a while back, right? Almost what, 14 months ago, 16 months ago.
It was.
I was like, hey
Yeah,
man, I'm
it was
thinking
a
about
while
doing a
back.
thing.
Yeah.
It was a while back, and it was initially I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing a thing, and you were you. Took the time, carved it out, sat there with me, asked questions to get an understanding of what I wanted to do. Let me ask questions, provided answers, help guide me through kind of like what I think right looks like in the approach. And then it's even the setup and everything else. So I appreciate you for doing that. But like, I want to get your perspective while I have you as the guy who's normally the host. Some lessons from the other side of the microphone, so to say. Because most people spend their lives answering questions, especially guys that are, teaching, coaching, etc. It's like all they do is answer questions.
Yep,
You spend a significant amount of time as that guy being the one that also asks those questions. Through Iron Sights, you've sat across, leaders, operators, coaches, entrepreneurs, first responders, athletes, all walks of life, right? Like, and that's a perspective very few people get to experience. So after all the conversations that you've had in the years that you've been doing this, like what qualities or characteristics seem to appear like most consistently among the people that you genuinely respect?
Yeah. Gosh. First off, I'll start this answer with I feel extraordinarily fortunate and grateful for every single conversation I've had with anybody that's ever given me any time, whether it's on the mic or off the mic, about any of this stuff. And part of it is like it's cathartic in a way to be asking the questions when for a lot of my life I've been the guy answering the questions. So whatever it happens to be, generally in the health and fitness industry, right, as a business owner, leader, whatever else. So like getting asked questions is I've been asked plenty and I've had to answer plenty, so I understand what it's like to sit in the other chair, and have to fire back, off the cuff or whatever the case. I think as I reflected on this question, because you did pre dispose me to this one specifically. If I look back and I think about like the best conversations I've had, number one, they're almost completely organic. Like I don't set people up with, here's all the things I want to talk about. Like I will give them like a brief of like the reasons why I want to talk to them. But I don't want this to be anything other than organic because they are used to answering those questions. And I want to see them in their true natural state. That for me, it's like, it's just two dudes talking, as if, we were sharing a whiskey and a cigar or, out on the range in between jamming mags or whatever else. Like, to me, those are the organic and genuine conversations that you can have. And that's where I tend to feel the most comfortable myself. So I'm just trying to repay the favor to the person across the table. And what I found is like most everybody, with the exception of like the first 5 minutes, and I probably could tell some stories about that, but they're very good at doing that. They're very open to doing that. They want to do that. So they're like, I've had a few people just sweating before they sit down in the chair. Like some of the most savage, best instructors I've ever met or ever seen or been on the range or Matt or whatever else with. Like, I'm like, dude, what is happening to you right now? Calm down. Like, we're just going to talk. That's all we're going to do. But they're just like completely nervous. And like you do the intro and you ask them to talk about themselves and they clam up. Or they were this totally lively person, right? The person that and then all of a sudden you tell them you're recording and the little red lights flashing on the cameras and on the recorder, and they're like, it's like, deer in the headlights. So making them, but having said that, they are very willing to have these conversations, and it's not, the other part about it is they're the majority of them, and this is the high percentage, like high 98%, are not there to promote their business. They're not there to promote themselves. They are there to basically, yes, explain themselves, and a bit of that is self-promotion, but it is really about like people that really care and want good information getting out there. And I think that is a key characteristic of many of the people that I that I interview, and that they are very passionate about helping other people. And they do that in different ways, and that comes in different forms sometimes. And yes, there can be money attached to that. Oftentimes there is, because they own businesses, they're entrepreneurial or whatever. They work for somebody else, and somehow they're benefiting from this too. But that's not ever what this has been about. And so, from a very root perspective, it's about, look, they care, they're very passionate, and they want to share. They want to share what they know. They're not afraid to share what their mistakes have been. They're not afraid to talk about, you know, what they think is the right way, while also being objective and understanding that there are different ways to do things. They're generally very transparent and honest about what's going on. There are certain questions I will and won't ask, and we cover that at the beginning. Like, I ask, like, what's off limits. That's a respect thing. Like, and I also say, like, I am not here to talk about this other person. That it maybe come up, like, publicly, like this. Maybe there's a beef.
Yeah.
I care nothing about that. And I think what I've recognized from those guests is that they respect that. They don't want to do that. They recognize that maybe that beef has put them on the map, right? Maybe that beef is kind of keeping a thing alive for them, like through social media or whatever else. They also respect that that's not what I'm here for, and they're totally on board with that. And they just wanted they're curious to answer the questions that I might have for them. And they're always, most of the, well, I'd say 99.9% of them, because I don't have a perfect record at anything in life, but they're always very grateful. They're always very appreciative of, the time that I've, that they've spent. And I always find that to be very cool for me, because the most important thing in my life anymore is the time that I have and the people that I spend it with. That's the most important thing anymore. So when anybody ever gives me that time and they acknowledge that it was valuable for them and that they really appreciated it, that certainly charges the battery and keeps me coming back to it. So I think the very direct answer to your question is, these are generally good people trying to do a good thing. We've all made mistakes. None of us are perfect humans. But they're really, they like the idea that somebody wants to hear the longer form answer to their question that they're often limited to giving, again, through a social media post or during that course that they're teaching, because they got 16 other people standing in front of them and there's just very little time, to do that. And they want to switch off, right? They want to switch off, during that time, like after, like, oh, hey, instructor David, let's go get some dinner afterwards. I always appreciate that, as an instructor, but at the same time, I'm like, dude, I just spent the last 8 hours like having to be switched on. Like, I need to down regulate here. So I think that part of it is a little bit of that for them too, is they can kind of do it and not feel pressured to do it, and they enjoy that about it. That's something that they've told me, so that's what I continue to try to provide folks.
Yeah, that's awesome. Has your understanding of success, leadership, or performance changed at all as a result of those conversations, or would you say it was just more or less re-solidified?
Good question. I think things have been validated. Things have been challenged in some ways, but not in like I was wrong about this. It was more like, oh, I could be way better about this. This dude just gave me some serious perspective that helped me understand myself, maybe a deficiency that I knew I was aware of, or I was aware of, and maybe how to approach it a little bit differently. So for sure, I have been influenced by guests on the show, for sure, and like personally and professionally. And I think the bigger takeaway there is like that's what the interviews are supposed to be about. Like, as long as there is a mutual exchange of value, a value exchange, like these things work. And so, yeah, like, again, that revalidates, like, you're in a leadership position. I don't know. I have a podcast. It's got some followers, right? It's got some reach with some people in a specific audience, and that's cool. And people might look at that and go, well, that's the reason this person's coming on your show, because they're just trying to self-promote or whatever else. I have with very few exception, ever gotten that impression from anybody, right? Like it's most of the time, it's like I'm honored to even be asked, like, what are we going to talk about? Like, I don't even like, again, like I'm not even sure I should be on that show. And every one of those conversations where somebody's been like, dude, if you think I can provide any kind of value, like I'm happy to be there. Yes, I'll do this. At the end, that has always happened. Like it has always come true. And so, and for me as well, like just, I learned something from you today. Like, and I try to recap that, like to a person, to let them know right there. Just like I said, it's important for coaches to do with their clients or instructors, whatever we're looking at there. Like, let people know how you impacted them so that they have that feedback to walk away with. It's not just the transaction of questions and answers. And specifically, David, when I had you on the show the first time, or the last time, which was now a few years ago. At this point, I can't believe it's been that long. I learned a tremendous
Time
amount.
flies.
Yeah, I learned a tremendous amount from you, not just about you, but about how you problem solve, and from a philosophy perspective, how you approach that problem solving and your decision making. And that absolutely, and there was some very specific context to some of that. People should go back and listen to that episode. It was excellent. It's one of my favorite episodes ever. But that flowed through to different aspects of my life, being a father, right? Being a podcaster, being a business owner, being a coach. Like there were threads of all of that came through there. So I mean, that's a specific example of kind of what I learned from you. But I get that from every single guest. Very rarely do I go, oh, that was a total waste of time. I do sort of push the mic away sometimes. I go, well, I don't know if anybody's going to listen to that. I hope they do, because that was fun for me. But, I don't know until it goes out there. And that's another interesting thing you're probably learning. Very tough to get podcast feedback, right? Like metrics and data and things like that. So you're kind of just
Very
going
tough.
on your gut. Yeah, you're kind of just going on your gut.
Yeah. I appreciate the nod there, man. Like, I had a blast conversing with you, and the conversations that we had leading up to that. Definitely, it was a great time for me sitting down with someone and like yourself and just being able to talk perspectives and share ideas and concepts. Man, that was a great time for me. So I appreciate that.
Man, I appreciate you. Thanks for, getting me out of, the environment that I spend all day in and allowing me to even be a guest here. I'm incredibly honored. I mean, I know how much work you put into this and what you're trying to do with this show. I think when you reached out to me the first time when the conversation you had mentioned, I was like, "Are you sure, David? Are you sure you want to do this? Because this is a project, right?" And knowing the challenges that would exist, so I congratulate you on taking on the challenge to do it, because it's a big one. I know how much time, energy it takes to put these things on. So you having me here I'm super grateful for it, and I'm honored to do it without kind of overdoing that. And I'd also say this, like, again, like, I think these conversations, like, for people, we talked about like human element, keeping your finger on the pulse. It's really important for me to have these kinds of conversations, be on the other side of the mic. And I got my head down at work in the business. I'm doing a few other things out there, and I get to have conversations. But when people really take an interest in kind of understanding some of the deeper things that don't get discussed on the podcast, don't get discussed in my business life and whatever, it's very helpful for me to reflect on, just check in. And so this has been like a huge check-in kind of for me in this last couple hours. And it just reminds me how important it is to do that with other people, especially other dudes. And you've always been a very well, you've been a supporter of mine, but you've also been one of those guys that I mentioned and alluded to earlier that I can call. If I have a question, I'll send a text or make a call to, and you're there. You'll give me whatever amount of time you've got to give and all the answers that you could possibly give me to things that have always been very helpful for me. So this is a little bit of it's kind of a special one for me. So I thank you for this, man. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise, man. I appreciate it. Scott, after everything that we've talked about today, if there was one idea, one principle or responsibility that you hope people carry with them well after this conversation ends, what would it be?
I think the world needs more leaders, right? And they need good leaders. Sorry, I think, to be specific. And I think that term leader has been it's a very broad term. Like, what does it actually mean? And I think people try and kind of aspire to be a leader in some way, in some organization, something, the lead on social media as this expert or whatever else. And I hope, because this came up so many times, like, you're being a leader in your own house, with your family and those people that are really close to you, and that starts with working on yourself. Stop trying to be something, maybe that you're not, or try to get too far ahead of your skis on the things that need to happen. Get control of your own house, tidy that up, and before you start to try and do things outside of there, because your lack of ability of your lack of ability to structure the way you present yourself, who's in the room, the people that are important for you, or important to you, and ultimately important for you. And structure those conversations, and structure those lessons and learn from them, and learn, and because they will teach you, how to be a good leader, and where your deficiencies lie. I think that the world needs more people out there like you that are really trying to just kind of talk about these basic principles and the lessons that exist. And I think people should listen to more stuff like this. They should read more stuff like this. That's where your answers are. Don't play that game of comparison. Like, what's this guy doing? Who's presumably a good leader, or is being kind of reflected as that. Like, leadership is an important thing, and you don't have to be a leader to all people, but you certainly need to start at home and in your own communities, and think about how you can do a better job at that. Knowing you're going to fail and being okay with that, but surrounding yourself with other leaders that you can check in with, and that will give you honest feedback and be transparent with you, and help you celebrate the wins, but also recognize when you're not doing so great as a leader, because that's going to happen. I think that's the one thing I would say. I think this resonates through all kinds of things, whether it's the home, the family, the church, the business, the company, the relationships that you have with your friends, whatever else. Just be a good dude and be a good leader.
I love it. Scott, thanks for taking the time to sit down with me and have this conversation, man. Genuinely appreciate it, sincerely. Honored that you made the time to be here. Dude, for those who want to learn more about Red Dot Fitness, the Ironsides podcast, or follow the work that you're doing, where would you direct them?
Yeah, it's easy. We're super active on Instagram. You can go red_dot_fitness. It's a good place to find out about us. Again, we got just the brick and mortar here in San Jose, California, but we have some online programs there you can find out about. Everything's there. The website, it's red.fitness.net. You can go there. Ironsides is ironsidespodcast.com. That the website's going to get a little bit of a makeover soon, but it's Ironsides Podcast on Instagram and on YouTube. So you can find it there. We're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. I have been in the lab with a pen and a pad for the last probably 6 months. It's been kind of an 18-month project for me, but I kind of shut down the podcast to step back to do a better job with it, and I have some things in the mix. We're about to release the first episode we've recorded since SHOT Show 2026, which happens in January. So I'm about to put that out. It should be out in the next couple of weeks. I don't know when this one's going to drop, David, but we'll look getting that thing out about the 1st of June, so people can be ready to see the podcast reappear. It'll be bigger and better. We had some things in the works. There might even be some extra things that'll come along with that. I'm excited to get it back out there. So yeah, go do the things, like, follow, share, and be on the lookout for some new offerings from Ironsides Podcast that I'm excited about.
Awesome, man. Yeah, we'll definitely put all that in the show notes, and we'll always support you, dude. To everyone listening, thank you for joining us today on the AHT podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, make sure you do all the things like Scott said: subscribe, leave a review. More importantly, just share it with somebody that you think may benefit from listening to it. Until next time, stay dangerous.